Welcome back to the Opposition Podcast, a very special live stream. Mate, I want to thank you, Rukshan, because I know you took time out of your busy schedule from campaigning with Lydia Thorpe to be here with us tonight.
Yeah, of course.
How you doing?
Yeah, look, when I'm not campaigning with Lydia Thorpe or Fatia Payman, as you've said in the past, I'm doing pretty good. It's good. It's good to be here, and I think this is a special occasion because I just want to kind of have a monologue at the start and say that we've been watching the leaders debate multiple times. I think we watched on ABC, we watched on Sky News, we watched on 9 News the other day, Anthony Albanese and Dutton going at each other, and we never get to hear from the other parties, the other individuals who are involved in our great democracy as well. So it's always good to provide an opportunity to do that. And for the people of Australia and especially Victoria, with the Senate candidates that are on today, to have that. And I think, we do a better job than the ABC, because this is what the ABC should be doing. And unfortunately, it's up to you and me, Avi, to and other independent media to do these type of broadcasts. And it's a shame, but I'm very excited to be able to do this with you today.
Yeah, I've got to say, look, I tweeted this out because I love watching political debates. I enjoy them. And watching the debates, I think it's been 3 now, Sky, ABC, 9, yeah, it's been 3. I literally fall asleep. And the last one, Rhonda, my wife, just sits there going, oh God, when's this going to be over? She doesn't care about any of this. But yeah. I'm like, all right, we're going to watch our show after. And I just said, you know what, just turn it off, put the show on, because it got that boring, So hopefully tonight we can roll this group up and make it a little bit more entertaining. But more importantly, I imagine most of the viewers are like me, where these 3 candidates, especially if you're in Victoria, or these 3 parties are in your top 3, you just don't know which order you're going to put them. Hopefully, at the end of tonight, you have a better idea as to where you want to put them. What I'll do is I'll invite the guests on, and then I'll explain to the audience out there. Guys, hit the share, hit the like, spread this live around. I know our Rumble doesn't seem to be working, so it's on YouTube, X, and Facebook. For some reason, Rumble's crashed out. Our guests tonight, we have Warren Pickering from One Nation. How you doing, mate? Welcome to the debate.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, as always.
Jordan Ditloff, is it? How do I pronounce it? Ditloff?
It is. You've done well. German name. Easy to spell, hard to say.
The Libertarian Party. And then we have our good friend Bernie Finn from Family First. Thank you all for joining us in this debate tonight, because I know you guys are surely tired campaigning now for several weeks, but now you're probably at the booth, so we really do appreciate you coming tonight. The way this is going to work is you're all going to start with a minute opening. We've got the timer there at the bottom, which is my job to press play every time, so make sure, keep me honest. You'll have a minute each to open. Then we're going to throw at you 12 questions. Between me and Rukshan, we'll question it. Rukshan will start. After that, you'll each get a question to each other or the other 2. Again, a minute answer for either the one candidate or the 2 candidates that need to answer. Then we are going to open the questions to the viewing public. And for those of you tuning in, so far we've got almost 1,800, even though we're not on Rumble, so that's pretty good. But you guys, if you do want, we're going to, throughout the campaign, the debate, we are going to, I will be putting up your comments here. But if you want to throw a question for the end, or you want your comment for sure to come up, so if you've just got a comment in the super chats on both of my YouTube channel and Rukshan's YouTube channel, if you throw in a super chat there, if it's just a comment, we will make sure to read it out at the end. But if it's a question that you want to put to the panel or to one of the candidates as part of the debate, again, that'll be your chance. So all you got to do is throw in a super chat that again is on Rukshan's channel or my channel. But if you put comments on X, Facebook, or YouTube throughout this campaign, throughout this, I don't know why I'm calling this campaign, throughout this debate, which looks like it's going to be a family event as well, we will throw your comments or some of your comments throughout, and then each candidate will have a chance for a minute closing after we go through the super chat comments and questions. Guys, we ready? Yep, that's a yes. Yep, we're ready. All right, so
yes, ready to go, mate. Ready to go.
We're going to start with Warren. You can start with your 1 minute opening statement. Hit us.
Please.
All right.
Let's go
Yep, my name
outside.
is President of One Nation Victoria and lead Senate candidate. This will be the second federal election.
Will you just go outside?
Lead Senate candidate again.
Will you just go outside?
Yeah, look, I'll advocate for all the normal, I suppose, values that One Nation generally stands for. So what we're aiming to achieve with this election is to achieve the balance of power in the Senate. That would be our ultimate ambition, and we think that's realistically the best outcome for Australia at this point in time, is potentially a Liberal government with One Nation holding the balance of power on the crossbench to pull that party back to its Conservative base. That's achievable, and it would be fantastic. Look, we intend to do this as a One Nation party. As always, we truly believe ourselves to be the last bastion of true conservatism in this country, and we have common sense policy to boot. Priorities will obviously be cost of living through responsible energy management, cap immigration until we can get our feet back under ourselves, and uphold the long-held traditions of pushing back on the crippling tenets of globalism.
So thank you. We let you go a couple of seconds over time because the beginning was a bit hard to hear. If you guys have noise in the background, just make sure to mute your mic. I think you can do it from your end while that's happening. Jordan, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Well, my name's Jordan. I'm the lead Senate candidate for the Libertarian Party. And there was one thing that you said in your introduction that isn't true. I was on the ABC last night, and they said that our policies of ending net zero, of defunding the Department of Education federally, and a number of other policies were extreme. And they put those policies and me and my candidacy to Amelia Hamer of the Liberal Party in Kooyong as an attack vector, saying that, we were out of step with Liberal Party principles. And unfortunately, today that's true. The Liberal Party have completely lost their way. If you looked at the Menzies We Believe statement and the Libertarian Party's principles, they would look the same. But the modern Liberal Party has just morphed into a Frankenstein's monster that is begging for death. So if you vote for us, you'll be voting for a young, hungry party that's getting great fundraising, great momentum, is a real community organisation with branches, and exists between elections to move the needle in the community.
Fantastic. Bernie, go ahead.
Thank you very much for that, and thanks for the invitation tonight. And I apologise for the noise a little bit earlier. It's one of the joys of having a son with autism. He sometimes does things that you don't quite expect. Look,
we know that you set that up to throw Warren off, but that's okay.
No, I wish I had, mate. I wish I had. Family First is a party, I have to say, that I have found a home in after being thrown out of the Liberal Party for being a Conservative, and that's as I think Jordan said before, that is showing just how out of step the Liberal Party is with modern conservatism, and Family First is now standing for things that nobody else is standing for. And whilst I respect Warren's view that they are the only Conservative Party, I would have to put in that, in fact, Family First is the only true Conservative Party. We are the only true socially conservative party left in Australian politics, and I'm very proud of that.
All right, there we go. Great start. I reckon, Rukshan, maybe you could throw the questions because I'm managing the comments and the thing. So I reckon you can do all the questions if you're happy to.
Oh yeah,
and
sure,
I'll
yeah. I
manage
mean, if you're overloaded with the tech stuff, for sure.
I know. I've turned into an Indian. I don't understand what's happened here. Roles are being
it's
reversed.
Role reversal.
The Jews are supposed to control the Indian who controls the tech. I don't know what's happening here.
speaking of Indians, and this question kind of goes to a little bit to that as well. One of the hot topics online, especially on online discourse, and sometimes our leaders and the opposition leader touches on this issue as well, and that is the topic of immigration. So, Jordan, I'm going to throw this question to you first to start off. How would your party, if in the Senate, manage immigration to balance economic growth with infrastructure strains, and obviously including the strain on housing that a lot of people say immigration puts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the first thing to recognise is that all of us will be in an environment where, even if we did hold the balance of power, we'll be working with or trying to influence the majors to a policy position that they'll accept. What we've seen is that the majors are absolutely weak and absolutely unwilling to recognise the failings of the current mass migration settings. And so the Libertarian Party actually have a policy which was costed by the Productivity Commission back in 2016. It's called a migration fee. And basically it proposes a much higher fee to represent the cost, as you said, of the economic footprint or infrastructure footprint of each new migrant when they come in, paid up front. So we basically propose that if our policy was to be implemented, we'd be looking at a 1% of existing population as the intake, and then basically auctioning off those spots each month, and basically having each migrant pay the fee that would be set by that auction. So in essence, we'd be proposing caps, we'd be proposing a much higher fee to recognise that Australia is a great place to live and that our permanent residency is very valuable, and we'd be making sure that that guides a better composition of migrant as well.
Thanks, Jordan. Bernie?
Look, we've made it very clear at Family First that we want to slash the rate of immigration to Australia. It is totally unsustainable at the moment, and we won't muck around. We're looking at least 50% because Australia and I saw something last year that really affected me, and that was I was up in Brisbane at the CPAC conference, and I was staying in it wasn't a flash hotel, but it was quite comfortable. And across the road there was a park, right on the outskirts of the city of Brisbane. And in that park was a tent city where people had set up and were actually living there with their families. And I thought to myself, how on God's earth in 2024, as it then was, in a rich country like Australia, could we have tent cities on the edge of our major cities? And I saw that and I realised. Then I suppose it reinforced just how much we need change in immigration. We need severe change, and we need it now.
Warren?
Yeah, when you consider what Bernie's just alluded to, tent cities and whatnot, and how this has sort of inspired him to realise that we need to address immigration. Look at the One Nation Party. We've been trying to address immigration for 25 years, arguably. Now, this was a foreseeable problem, and it is a problem that One Nation has always had a solution for, and we still maintain a solution for this problem. And our current solution, looking at the 1.8 million immigrants that have moved here, that is a city the size of Adelaide in the last 3 years, for those that aren't tracking, is to make sure you have to live here for 8 years before you can apply for citizenship. We are not the welfare state of the rest of the world. We are here to protect Australians, and look, there is such a strain on our resources at the moment. So we are saying we want to cap immigration at 135,000 a year until every Australian is homed, until our services can catch up and our industry, construction industry, can catch up to house people.
Perfect. So just not.
Yeah.
No, go for it.
I'm trying to. Was there a big point of difference there that you found from those three answers in actual practical? In how they're going to manage it. So from One Nation compared to Libertarian to Bernie, is there a big difference in the way you're actually practically managing? I know Bernie, you told us what you found there, but in practical terms, what will you guys do?
Well, we will stop 50% of the migrants who are coming into this country at the moment. We will stop them from coming in, and that will be, I think, a giant step in the right direction. And we will see if that has an impact. If it doesn't, well, we might have to increase the rate of cuts. So we are looking at that, and that will be something that we'll keep monitoring and see what is needed.
And so yours is 50%. One Nation is what? I'm thinking of it as a viewer, just so I got a
We've
point.
currently got average 220,000 a year leaving, and we'd cap it at 135 until we can get our feet under ourselves. So effectively, we'd be going net zero.
And Jordan,
below.
you guys, what were you guys doing
The
for?
effect of our policy will be about 60,000 to 100,000 per year. But one of the dangers of not changing the system and just changing numbers is that, like we saw with COVID, once the wheel turns and the forces of darkness get back into power, they'll just compensate for the time where numbers were better. So we need to change the system, and that's the difference the Libertarian Party's policy makes.
And what's the change in the system you would make? Or
the change in the system we would make, we would be imposing a higher upfront migration fee to basically ensure a better composition of migration, as well as making sure that it's outside the government's control to manipulate.
Do you guys like that policy, or is that something you wouldn't agree with?
I think it houses its own series of biases and challenges that you'd have to confront before you were to implement that policy. Just because upping the rate, I agree, it's a good idea in theory, but the reality is you're just going to find people, potentially from the wrong crowds reaching out to come over. You might end up with, I don't know, Russian mobsters moving to Australia because they can afford to. I don't know that that's the best way, and I don't know how you'd police that.
So I guess what I'm hearing, libertarians are arguing that they're trying to find a way to bring quality over quantity. What would One Nation do, to achieve that same outcome?
Well, One Nation has always proposed that we should only be allowing, because this country it's the envy of the rest of the world, the Western world specifically. Now, let's be honest, there's people that want to come here from anywhere, and we currently have 75,000 people in this country that have overstayed their visas and are here illegally. Now, obviously, you need to judge each case on its merit, and we're advocating that those people should be sent back to where they came from. Make an example of them, and tell the rest of the world that our kindness will no longer be abused as a country. We wish to allow people in that are from culturally cohesive nations, because as much as we all would like to be farting rainbows, mate, the reality is not everybody is culturally aligned with Australian values.
So for you, it's not specifically financial; it's more about ideology. Cultures that are going to assimilate
socially and economically. Yeah.
Bernie, where do you guys sit? Quickly.
Well, we're pretty close to what Warren's just said. We want to ensure that we don't allow people into this country who want to kill us. And there's, this situation where thousands of Gazans have been allowed into to Australia by Albo and his mates. That is just appalling, because I've been over there. I've seen what they're taught. I've seen how they think. I've seen how they learn, and they hate us. They hate us, and I don't see why we should have to put up with that as Australians. Why we should have to put up with thousands and thousands of people who are coming here who aren't going to change. Let me tell you, they're not going to change. If anybody thinks they're going to change, they're living in a fool's paradise. What in fact we're going to have is just thousands and thousands of people who hate us, who want to do some dreadful things, I suspect. And even yesterday on the polling booth, I had Family First on my shirt, and it said this bloke came up to me. He's I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East, and he said to me, "You're not Family First. You're Israel First." And abused me over that. Now, we shouldn't have to put up with that in Australia. That's a war that's been fought over there for many, many years. We don't want it coming here to Australia, but unfortunately, that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, this kind of I'll sort of jump to the next question now, because this kind of leans into that second question that I had for all three of you.
But
and
I think just let's 1 second. Let's just let the viewers know, and we're gonna. This debate is kind of fluid, so we're going to keep the bell going on the first question. Follow-up questions, we'll let it flow a bit naturally, but I might push you to get to a specific point more. For those of you just tuning in, because I can see that there's many still tuning in as we speak, you can throw your comments in there. I'm trying to scroll through them. If you definitely want your comment to come up at the end, we're going to be doing the... what are they called? The super chats on YouTube. So on Rukshan and my YouTubes, we have the live feed running. Chuck a super chat. We will keep them till the end. And in that, if you do also, as part of the super chat, want to pose a question, The only extra questions that we're going to give from the audience is going to be from those super chats, so it's up to you guys if you want to put it in there. Otherwise, you can put your comments in and make sure to share this debate wide. And welcome to the show. Question 2, go for it, Rukshan.
Yeah, Bernie kind of stole my thunder there. But
He always does, this guy. I've known him for years.
Sorry, mate.
But I'll get that question in, and Bernie, you can actually start it off. So the second question was, how would your party protect our borders from extremist ideologies? So, as an example, Donald Trump in the United States of America, they're rounding up extremist students and sending them back, for instance. And we don't really hear our leaders in the Labor or Liberal Party really talk about how to deal with the scourge of extremism that's running across Australia, because a lot of people feel emboldened to be extreme in our country with almost no objection from the authorities. So how would your parties, this is to all three of you, but Bernie, you can start, deal with this extremism that we're finding now, especially through new immigrants that are coming to this country?
Well, I think anybody who comes to our country and breaks the law should be sent home. I mean, it's a severe law. I mean, that's something that should be automatic. They should be sent home immediately. But Family First has made it very, very clear that we want a ban on all Muslim immigration to Australia, because that seems to be the area. Well, not seems, it is the area that is causing us the most trouble, and that's something that we want to see fixed. Because what we must do on a whole range of areas, migration most certainly is one of them, is we've got to put Australia at the forefront and the interests and the benefits to Australia at the forefront of our decision-making process. And if they're not, if we're not prepared to do that, any government is not prepared to do that. They shouldn't be in government. They're not fit to be in government. We've got to have a thought process which puts what is best for Australia number one. And at the moment, that's not happening. And we've got to do the things that I have said in order to do that.
You got to wait till my bell so I have something to do.
Sorry, mate.
Warren?
So how would One Nation address it? Well, I think One Nation's been trying to address this for 30 years. Again, gentlemen, I think it comes down to highlighting the differences in value sets between those who fundamentally don't align with the Australian Judeo-Christian value set that has made this country the best place in the world to live. And I think that's important to note, that we need to be tougher on crime. We've got such problems with crime in this country, and a lot of that, I'm not blaming specific minorities within their community or different ethnicities, but they are represented disproportionately in certain communities as well. So is there an education factor that needs to be looked at? Is it a lack of honest reporting from the media? Because we know it's probably a combination of these things. We are seeing it everywhere. And we've got to stop allowing judges to get away with slapping people on the wrist because their culture doesn't practice things this way. They don't understand this. Well, too bloody bad. And again, as Bernie said as well, I'll second that point too. This is why we say you don't get to be an Australian citizen until you've been here 8 years. That way, we've always got the option to throw you out if you misbehave.
Sorry, I missed my bell. I was reading the comments. Jordan, go ahead.
Jordan.
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is that I absolutely agree with Bernie's point about if people who come here in a permanent residence and so forth break the law and commit a serious offence, then they should be open to being sent back to their home origin. I think that's absolutely what should be happening. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of two-tier policing and judicial things start to emerge. I also agree with Warren that there should be a much longer period of time. The Libertarian Party thinks 10 years is the appropriate time before being eligible for citizenship and welfare. But I think that I would go on this issue with what JD Vance said, which is that government is very bad at imposing top-down solutions to cultural problems. And I think all we need to do as a group, all of us, who have all been dubbed extremists by the government through the COVID years, is to remember that government legislation is a very blunt instrument, and a leftist government will use the very laws we consider in place to deal with certain kinds of extremism, to deal with extremism that people of the woke intersectional left and globalists would consider extreme. So I think that as a society, we need governments who set an example through leadership and through cultural change rather than through legislative change.
I'm just going to throw the bell in there, so I skipped last time. But okay, that's an interesting point of difference. So you guys don't? Do you guys have a specific, criteria for protecting the borders from those ideologies. So, for example, Family First is I guess pointing to Trump's old last administration, his Islamic ban. I don't know if he means do you mean, Bernie, all Muslims in general, or do you mean the certain countries, a bit like what Trump did last time? Can you clarify that for us?
No, we're not talking about certain countries. We're talking about all Muslims at the moment, because there is discontent, and I've got to say, this makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but it's got to be done. I mean, if we have got to pick, if there is a clear case of a group of people in our society causing problems, we have to address that, and if we don't, we're letting Australians down. That's our job, you know. That if we're in government, that's our job. If we're in Parliament, that's our job. And if we don't do that, well, then we're failing. And I believe that that's a policy that would have an enormous impact. I think that we really need to address this as a matter of urgency. And when I say that we need to stop migration of all Muslims. I would hope at some point we'd be able to lift that ban, but I think at the moment we need it. And you know, when you see the city of Melbourne being, well, you know, thousands of Muslims running amok in the streets on Sundays, that worries the hell out of me, I've got to tell you.
So I guess some of the counter thing that people would say is, firstly, those rallies are mixed. You have a lot of leftists, which I agree with you.
Yes,
we should deport the leftists. But so you have a lot of leftists, and then the other side to that is, you know, there are plenty of Muslims that live here that are you know, law abiding, don't get involved in any of that.
No, mate, I'm not talking about deporting them. I'm talking about stopping
more Islamic immigration,
more coming in. Yeah,
and
that's
you
right.
said
stopping more coming in.
You'd hope to overturn it. At what point would you overturn that?
Well, we'd have to wait and see what impact. I mean, as I said before, you know, with the slashing of the immigration rates, we would have to see what impact that has. If it's an effective source of doing things, and if it is, well, then we'll use it more. But we would have to see the impact that this has, and you know, we are, to a very large degree, I think, not guessing, but we are working on a project to make Australia better, and we'll just have to see if that works.
Jordan, so what do you think about that? The fact that basically Family First is saying a blanket rule until we, I guess, understand what's going on, until we get on top of this issue. I'm assuming you're talking about extremism in the community. In the last year and a half, we've seen a lot of it flaring up. What's the Libertarians' kind of response to a policy like that?
Well, I think that many of the problems we have now, we wouldn't have if the laws we already have and the security checks and intelligence checks we're meant to have in place were actually enforced, in particular in the case of a lot of the recent Gazan refugee visas. I think that we wouldn't have the problems we have now. So I think that it's less a question of certain countries or things like that, because, you know, I just have concerns with how Turkey's policy would be practically implemented. For example, a country like Turkey, do you classify that as a Muslim country? Turkey is quite secular. Yes, they have an Islamic sort of cultural background, but a lot of Turkish people are Islamic in the same way that most Catholics are Catholic. You know, it's sort of, you know, they might do a holiday here and there or whatever, but it's not something that drives their everyday life. And a lot of Turkish immigrants that come to Victoria have been very productive, integrated very well, started businesses. You know, they've come here to get their family away from all those problems, and they're as concerned, because I've spoken with many people from the Turkish business community over the last 12 months, they're just as concerned as we all are here about what's being done in their name by these Gaza protests. And I agree with you, Avi. I think that probably the worst offenders in a lot of the activities in the Gaza protests have been white, educated socialists. And, you know, we still haven't got any suspects on that mosque bombing, but, you know, I don't think they would have brown skin, let's put it that way. So I think that, again, what we need is, like what we had in the Howard era, a sense of identity as Australians that transcends these things. And I know you've talked about this a lot, Rukshan, but it is cultural. That is what we need. We need leadership, and we need narrative of what it means to be Australian. That means we don't resort to these sectarian, lowest common denominator, tribal sort of identities.
Warren, has One Nation changed their sense? I know One Nation was very supportive of that of Bernie's policy, Australian First policy, family first policy, a few years ago. Is it still along those lines for One
We
Nation
don't
now?
specifically have firm policy on it, but I think most people are aware that of the One Nation position on this. I wouldn't have too many problems with Bernie's policy the way he's raised it. If he were to raise it, I'd have a few questions, but I'd likely support it in this regard. Now, I also agree with some of the points that Jordan has made, that this is cultural, and I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed. But I think the best way to address this problem, the cultural aspect of this problem, is for the leaders of that faith, who we haven't seen come out and condemn the actions of Hamas and whatnot over the years. I think that's problematic. It can continue to stoke the fires of discontent within the community if the leaders of that faith or ideology or whatever you want to call it aren't coming out and demonising the actions of these terrorist groups that are committing these atrocities.
We've got to deport the hate preachers too. That's very important.
Great,
Yeah.
mate.
Well, I guess it's a question about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I do understand. Trust me, I'm the first person that often is the one that receives much of the hate from the people that I don't think belong in this country. Having said that, not many people know this. I have 2 Muslim stepkids, so I don't know about the idea of, I don't think anyone, just like what Jordan said, everyone that identifies as Muslim is necessarily bad. My stepkids identify as Muslim.
No, look, and don't take that the wrong way either, mate, because I'm the same. I've got family on my mother's side that are Albanian Muslims. So,
having said that, I do see the issue with opening borders to countries where there is a high level of extremism, because it is so hard to vet them. Having said that, we look at places like the UAE. Bernie, would you have a problem with people coming to Australia from the UAE?
Well, I'm not talking about particular countries. I'm talking about
I'm talking about Muslims from the UAE.
I mean, the thing, mate, the problem is this. The problem is this, and it has been the problem for a very long time, and that is that there are good Muslims, but we know that there are some bad Muslims, and we can't tell the difference between them. And, I don't want to see more people murdered in the streets of Melbourne as a result of these people coming to Australia. I mean, we, as I said before, as a government, we, as parliamentarians, we have an obligation to protect the people. And that's the first role of any government, is to protect the people, and we have to do that. We have to act to do that. Now, it might seem unfair. It might seem difficult to implement. It might be a whole range of things, but it may also be very, very effective in protecting Australians from what a lot of people are suffering from. For example, in the UK, UK is just. It's gone to hell in a handcart, and I see that happening here in Australia too. And I'm not alone. I've had a number of people over the last many months that I've been campaigning saying exactly the same thing to me. And these are issues that we have to tackle head on. And if we don't, we're just failing. We're giving up before we even start.
I think the whole panel here, and I certainly agree with what you're saying, the problem that we can see. My question is, how would you practically implement that? So if your thing is not targeting countries, rather it's targeting religion, how would you identify somebody's religion? And is that not in itself potentially a discriminatory way of processing it? So if 2 people come from the same country, will you accept one that's Muslim and you won't accept the one that is Muslim, but you'll accept the one that's Christian? How would you practically do it, and do not see that there's potentially legal issues with doing that?
Well, there probably are legal issues, but if we had the numbers in the House and the Senate, we could actually change the law so that we don't have legal issues. I mean, this is about protecting Australians. This is what I'm saying.
But how would you practically do it?
How would I practically do it? We would literally stop Muslims from coming into Australia.
How do you work
as
out
migrants.
if somebody's Islamic?
Well, you would
And
ask.
if I can,
I
sorry,
mean,
I'll just
there
make this
there would
point that
be.
it's not just that there's legal issues, it's that there's practical issues. Like if you say person X from the UAE who's Muslim can't come, but person Y who isn't Muslim can, how are you going to verify and cooperate with these countries to ascertain who is Muslim, who isn't? You know, people will of course just say they're not if they want to migrate to Australia. And also, who's to say that law that doesn't set a precedent for our political enemies when they're in control, which they will be? And this is the problem, unfortunately, with some conservative political thinkers, is that they make policy thinking they're always going to be in charge. And libertarians understand that the wheel turns and that there will be periods of leftist control and globalist government. And they will use the laws you've created against you.
Jordan, there will be periods of leftist control. Unfortunately, far too much of time will be spent under leftist control. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we would if we were going to try this, we would be in government, and that's what we would have to do. And I think that if we were in government and we did the right thing, that people would support us. And I'm quietly confident about that, and in fact, more than quietly confident. I'm very loudly confident about that. I think that the Australian people would support such a law. I think the Australian people would support such an immigration program, and I'm more than happy to put it to the test at any election. In fact, I'm doing it now.
Perhaps a solution for going forward to formulate an actual policy would be to actually have a look at the failures, break down through effectively an after-action review of what's gone on in Britain in the last decade, because arguably they are 10 years on the same trajectory as us, 10 years further down the track. Now, if you pulled it apart where the failures of their immigration policy have been over the last 10 years with a fine-tooth comb, I think that probably gives you, it's not going to be a perfect solution, obviously, but I think it'd probably give you a good series of guidelines to start in formulating policy around this topic.
And I agree with that,
It's
because
a great idea, great suggestion from Warren.
The last serious review into migrant intake was in 2016, so I think we are well overdue for a serious review. So I'd agree with Warren on that.
Yeah, well, we're unanimous on that.
I guess the question that the point that Jordan brings up that I think is valid is the precedence that it sets. So let's say, yes, maybe most of Australia agrees with you. Maybe I even agree with you. But one, I see the problem in the practical thing of it. So making it happen without people cheating the system. If you're just ticking a piece of paper, it's a bit like when you get on if you've ever gone to America and they make you tick, or they used to make you tick a box, I am not a terrorist. I've never engaged in terrorism. Okay,
yeah, I still do that.
Fine, I tick the box. So a lot of people tick.
You got me.
A lot of people tick the box, but the precedence that sets that if we can target people not by the location, so I get we don't want to import bad ideologies, but if you target them based on religion, that instead of the country or the area, then you are opening the door for them to target Christians next, or Jews, or Hindus, or anyone that becomes the popular or the government at the time has the power to do. What would you do to safeguard?
Christians, Jews, and Hindus are not involved in the sort of terrorism.
Sure, we're not arguing that.
Seems to emanate from the Muslim world. I mean, this is what we.
I would disagree.
Before,
there has certainly been some Hindu terrorist activity in India, and they actually had an assassination.
Well, in India, but not in Australia. Not in Australia. If they'd started doing that, well, then I'd certainly look at expanding it to any religious group or any cultural group, for that matter, who was involved in any terrorist activity. But at this point in time, we are specifically talking about Islamic terrorists, and we unfortunately, they have largely caused this concern about Islam around the world by what many of them have done. It is just not a reasonable thing to suggest that we keep taking them at this rate and just accept these dangers as the norm. I mean, that to my way of thinking is just ludicrous, and it is the worst possible scenario that we could present.
I think a key point that I'm sure we can probably all agree on is that to implement any sort of legislation in this space, you would have to give it a grace period of 12 months and then reevaluate the successes and failures of said laws, because there's likely to be a flow-on implications that were, previously unable to anticipate.
All right.
Chung,
Well, I
go
think
as I said, we would have to review this constantly, and if it's not working, then obviously you go somewhere else or try something else. But if it is working, well, then you keep on doing it, and you might even find yourself in a position where it's working so well that you improve or increase the rate at which you're stopping this from happening.
Well, I
so I
think a
think
lot of
we've had
people
quite a
will call it a
robust
radical.
discussion. No, go for it. I was going to say we've had a robust discussion. We should continue on. We've touched a lot on immigration
I think it's pretty.
deportation.
It'll be considered a radical policy today, and I know it's certainly going to. Is that, I don't know if that policy's in on the Family First policy, official policies. Is that your listed?
Yes,
policy?
it is. It is official policy. Yes, it is. Yes.
So
Yes.
and I think it's worth certainly discussing it.
Definitely. No, because we don't really hear these kind of discussions in our normal everyday debates between our so-called elected leaders.
And we should. I mean, these are issues.
Definitely, it's
these
good to
are
flesh
issues
it out.
that are very important to the future of the country. We should discuss
and I
them.
definitely
We should
and I
debate
definitely
them.
do see many Australians, particularly online on social media, discussing these issues very openly. So, people definitely are talking about these things. To the next question, I'm going to put this to you, Warren, to start off with. So, what's your party's approach to ensuring affordable energy while also addressing the climate concerns of the major parties that you'd have to work with? Because obviously things like net zero, both the parties, Labor and Liberal, are for these things. So anyone in the Senate from your party would have to deal with them trying to get these things through as well. So we want to know how you would deal with this and also your approach to energy affordability in Australia.
Right. So firstly, dealing with the finer nuances of the major parties that have fallen victim to the fallacy that is man-made climate change. Look, we could navigate that with the balance of power on the crossbench by being amenable to their whims in other ways. But the reality is we won't compromise on what we know Australia needs right now is good, cheap energy. And we can get that through the abundance of brown coal, firstly, that we've already got. You can't take all security away from that industry for the last 10 years and then go, oh, look at that. The infrastructure's failing. Look at it. It's just old technology. Well, no, you've given them no future security. So there's been no incentive for the free market economy for them to tip money into preventative maintenance. On top of that, obviously, we'd look at the nuclear discussion, not go all in. But, the Cold War hangover of the past has got to go. We can no longer, sit on our moral high horse and spit vitriol about how we look at us. We don't use brown coal or nuclear, all the while being the hypocritical largest exporter on the planet of both thorium and coking coal. So realistically, we would balance common sense with good diplomacy and hopefully have the balance of power and force the major parties that have fallen victim to this to come across to our side of thinking. And it's good economic. It's going to save Australians money.
On to you, Jordan.
Look, we're a resource-rich, energy-rich country, but we've got energy scarcity, energy unreliability, and high energy costs. It's insanity, and we're fighting a battle with one hand tied behind our back by this climate ideology. So, as I said at the beginning, the ABC say our position of abandoning net zero is extreme. We would seek to basically force the Liberal Party to abandon net zero and to abandon the Paris Agreement, as Trump has done. In opposition. After this loss, they're going to go and do some soul searching. And if we're elected, and I'm a senator after May 3rd, then we're going to be prosecuting that argument that the reason for their loss was their lack of boldness in that area. And I think that's crucial. The next couple of months will be a time where the Liberal Party will be sort of charting its course forward. And if they're just left to their own devices, they're going to be weak, moderate, and unprincipled. And the Libertarian Party are going to, through the forces of competition, because we target the very same base the Liberal Party has. And we're a credible alternative to their voters. We showed that through the misinformation disinformation bill. We would seek to essentially shift the Liberal Party and repeal the ban on nuclear energy.
Thanks, mate. Bernie?
Yeah, well, look, I'm with Jordan on this one. I think it's an absolute nonsense that the Liberal Party holds the position that it does. I mean, there are millions of Australians out there who are desperately keen for the Liberal Party to come to its senses, and it's refusing to do so. And it's doing that to try and win back Kooyong, to try and win back Goldstein. I mean, we
Sorry, that was me. Go on.
Oh, sorry, mate. What we have to be concerned about is what is best for Australia, and what is best for Australia at the moment is using our coal and our gas to provide cheap electricity to heat our homes, to cool our homes in summer, to provide power for factories. That provide employment. I mean, that's what it's about. And, this nonsense about climate change, and, the climate's been changing since Adam gave, what was it, Eve gave Adam an apple. But since then, anyway, it's been a constant thing. And for us
Hold on,
now
Bernie.
to say...
Aren't you? You're a Christian, no?
Yeah, but I'm saying
Who gave it? You don't. I just want to make sure you know who gave who the apple.
I know Eve gave Adam the apple. I know, I'm aware of that. But I just threw very short. But as I say, I'm very tired. I've been on the polling booth all day.
I'm just giving you a hard time, mate.
Yesterday as well. But this has been going on forever. And for people to say that we can change the weather by not using our resources is just bloody madness. It is insanity of the first order, and we've got to get this sorted out. If Australia stopped tomorrow, stopped all of its the air things. What I'm trying to. I told you I'm tired. No, not the windmills. If we sorry. No, not the wind turbines either. No, that's all right. Don't worry. If we stop tomorrow, putting out into the atmosphere all the things that we do, it would have no impact. The only thing it would have any impact on would be the welfare of the people of Australia. It would send us broke. It would have no impact on the climate. It would have no impact on the weather. That is just nonsensical, and we have got to develop a policy of truth in this area and tell people that we're going to follow that policy of truth, and governments need to do that instead of sucking up to the UN, instead of sucking up to these bodies all over the world that are trying to send us broke. That's not good for Australia, and that's not what we emissions is the word I was looking for. Thank you very much, Unfiltered. And I have to say that my first priority as a senator would be to get us out of the UN and get us back into a common sense attitude to get Australia under a system which allows us to warm our homes, cool our homes, and we want to make power affordable again. If I'm allowed to say that anymore, I don't know. But that's what we want to do. We want to make it affordable.
That's definitely not the
again.
most controversial thing you've said tonight, Bernie. Don't worry about that.
Well, it's possibly not, no. But I thought I'd throw it in anyway. But that's what we need to do. There are pensioners in places not too far from where I'm sitting right now who have to stay in bed all day in winter because they can't afford to heat their homes. Now, in a country like Australia, to allow that to happen is an obscenity. It's an obscenity. When you have families sitting around the kitchen table at night discussing whether they feed the kids or pay the power bill, that is an obscenity. How could this happen in a country so rich in resources?
Just because Bernie had a good fair time there, do any of you want to add anything or challenge Bernie on any of what he just said?
Look, I think that at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to be stopping the government from being in the business of backing winners and losers. We need to be getting all energy subsidies out of the way. We don't just need to be replacing wind and solar subsidies with nuclear subsidies, which is pretty much what Dutton's plan is. We need to basically repeal all bans, repeal all subsidies, and allow Australia's mineral richness and resource abundance to actually benefit Australian residents and taxpayers.
I'd say you all agree on that, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Look, we've been saying it for years, mate. I believe all three of us agree with
No, that's fine. So we probably should move on because the point here.
Allow the free market to decide.
Yep, perfect. We just want to. I guess the point of this debate is to find where there's a point of difference in case that makes somebody decide in which order they're going to put you three. Because most of the people watching this probably have you in the top three or top few. So hopefully that helps. It doesn't help if you all agree on the same issue because you're still all at number one at that point. Next question. I think this is something where there is a point of difference.
We'll start it off with Jordan. Jordan, this question is: what specific abortion laws, if any, would your party advocate for in the Senate?
Well, at a federal level, the only question that can relate to is whether a particular senator would support a sort of legislation like the Babies Born Alive legislation that Alex Antich and Senator Babbitt sought to bring in. Otherwise, abortion is a state issue alone, and it should be a state issue alone. If you look at the US, the repeal of Roe v. Wade leaves it with the states to implement abortion policy, and that prevents a federal takeover from an oppressive leftist government from imposing one set of rules top down on the residents of each state. So the only question that can relate to at a federal level is whether the sort of legislation that was proposed, like that Babies Born Alive legislation, would be supported or rejected. And I would certainly support that kind of legislation if it was before me and I was voting in the Senate. I think that the point at which the child is out in the world on its own and capable of living and being saved in those extreme circumstances, absolutely, without question. It's not even a conflict of rights issue. It's nothing to do with the health of the mother or the well-being of the mother at that point. And, there should be life-saving care applied. So that's the only question that can be a federal abortion issue.
Bernie?
Well, I would suggest, Jordan, that in fact the funding, Medicare funding of abortion, is also a federal issue, and that's something that we should have a look at because,
Actually,
a lot of
that's
people
a good point,
say,
Sally, and I do have a little bit of time. And I would say that libertarians don't believe that your taxes should be funding other people's choices. So I would agree. Libertarians would say that public taxpayer funds shouldn't be funding abortions, and we would also support making sure that doctors shouldn't be forced to perform procedures like that against their conscience if they're people of faith.
Yeah. Well, we are in total agreement on those particular issues.
The libertarian position in general is anti the abortions or forget about.
No, it's a conscience vote. So I'm telling you, it's a conscience. So the libertarian position on abortion is a conscience vote. So in the federal context on those issues, I'm telling you how I would vote if I was elected.
Okay. Warren?
Is there anything else you want to add, Warren?
Family First is a 100% pro-life party, and we make no apologies for that. And I'm actually thrilled to be able to say that because I had a lot of trouble for a lot of years in the Liberal Party with my position, and I would have no hesitation in moving pro-life legislation which would be able to affect certain federal issues. And I would have no problem with obviously supporting legislation of that kind as well.
Is there any legislation that you'd see that the libertarians, for example, and we'll get to One Nation in a second, is there any legislation that you see that the libertarians could have that you think is going to be problematic, or if Jordan got in, that would be problematic for, I guess, people that care about this issue?
Well, I don't particularly because, as Jordan has pointed out, it's a relatively, I wouldn't say minor issue because it's a very serious issue, but it's an issue that is, in terms of federal matters, a very small area to cover. So I'm not sure that Jordan or any of his colleagues in the Libertarians would be able to do anything which I might disagree with, and Jordan has already pointed out that he wouldn't be doing things that I disagree with, and that's great. But we in Family First we are 100% pro-life. That's one of the main reasons that I joined Family First, because we actually believe that these children need to be protected, and Australia is losing or is risking the loss of being called a civilised nation. I mean, we have abortion until birth, legalised abortion until birth in every state and territory in the nation. That's shameful. That's shameful, and we should be fighting that. You know, there should be leadership from Canberra against this. There should be leadership from Canberra to protect these children. And if we're not doing that, then I think, you know, we are risking, as I said before, we are risking very, very much the prospect of maintaining our position as a civilized nation. You know, civilized nations do not do this to their children.
Warren?
Yeah, look, again, similar to both gentlemen, I'd reserve the right to a conscience vote. One Nation does have a pro-life policy, the reality of which is that we agree regarding born alive policy. Absolutely, babies deserve our care in this capacity. I also agree with Bernie to a certain extent with regard to abortion up until birth. You cannot do that and then claim to be a civilised society to a certain extent also. Now, I'd promote above all else responsible people to assume responsibility for their own actions. You know, there's so many ways to promote safe sex in this day and age in any modern Western country that to allow people to simply, you know, make decisions a bit late based off very little medical evidence when they've had ample opportunity to you know, terminate pregnancies very early on, I think is becoming irresponsible. But again, I agree with Jordan. I don't think that this is a federal government issue. It's largely a state issue. And I think if federal government did try to intervene, you'd end up at loggerheads with states who tried to push their own policy. So look, it's a tricky one. But personally, conscience vote, I'd be likely to vote, you know, with the traditional first trimester gestational term and thereafter. There needs to be specific circumstances, and more specifically, I'd be voting to protect the rights of doctors and nurses who refuse to conduct said procedures.
All right. Just before we continue, just want to let all the viewers, we've got about over 5,000 now. Guys, I know some of you are putting questions in the comments. Like we've said in the beginning, there are some super chats growing. All the super chats will be read at the end, including questions that can be debated by the panel. So if you have debate questions that we haven't actually gotten through or don't get to, make sure to go to the super chats on Rukshan or my YouTube and chuck it in one of those questions, and we'll get to it at the end. Otherwise, keep sharing. I hope you're enjoying. I know I'm working hard to get them to fight. They're agreeing on too much. There have been small points of differences, but we might unpack that at the end. Rukshan, go on to the next question, mate.
Yeah, mate. And also, Avi, you got to pay attention to the timer and the bell. I'm seeing the feedback from the community, and they're unhappy.
This is ridiculous. As a Jew, we're meant to control people, not technology.
I thought so. It makes sense. This is probably the most important question, I think, of the night, and one that many Australians, particularly Australian families, deal with. And that is, of course, the issue of cost of living. So how would your parties alleviate cost of living pressure for Australian families while being economically responsible? And this can start with Bernie.
Yeah, well, look, I think without question, the biggest cost of living impact that we have in Australia is power. And what we have to do, as I said before, is use the coal and the gas that we have. You know, we're talking about almost $1 trillion. No, we've actually reached $1 trillion in debt. We're talking about many. Was it $800 or $900 billion, which is just an obscene amount of money to promote renewables and to allow renewables to grow. We're talking about perhaps 400 million to develop a nuclear industry. We don't need either. Right now, we don't need either. Now, let's have a look at nuclear if that's the way we go. But what we need to do is we need cheap, reliable power for families in Australia, and that will flow through to businesses. It'll flow through to industry, and that's what we should be doing. If we can cure the power problem, we will cure the cost of living crisis.
Thanks, Bernie.
You made such a good point. We lost Jordan.
In
the meantime, Warren, go for it.
Yeah, look, so we've got a few really good economic policies this federal election. So firstly, we'd like to abolish the Indigenous industry and abolish net zero on climate change industries. right there is about $40 billion a year back into Australia's pockets. On top of that, I do agree with Bernie on cost of energy being such a pivotal piece in this puzzle. Realistically, the flow-on implications allow businesses to thrive, manufacturing to thrive, free market economy, the circulation of wealth, all that good stuff, not only just domestic household bills and whatnot, but also slashing taxes. So One Nation had excellent feedback on our couple splitting tax. So 2 individual entities with a child, at least one child, you won't pay taxes to individuals. You'll pay it as a single entity, potentially saving, 10 to 20,000 per family. Also removing the taxes on alcohol in licensed venues. So you'll be able to go to the pub with your family and feed everyone and have a couple of beers for under $100 again. And venues will be able to, actually thrive again for a start. And also halving the fuel excise tax for 3 years with intent to pursue that a little further. So responsible economic management and putting money back into the pockets of Australians.
Thanks, mate.
Well, I hope Jordan's all right. I might check in with him on the side here, but I think we continue for the moment without him.
Could I just say, Avi, could I just say that one policy that we have at Family First has, I really and fervently believe in this, and that is allowing or changing the tax system to allow one parent, usually a mum, but maybe a dad as well, to stay home and look after their children. That would save. I cannot begin to imagine how many hundreds of millions of dollars that will save in childcare fees. That it's going to be a plus for everybody. It's going to be a plus, a win-win-win for the parents, for the child, and for society. Because I think when parents raise their own children, that's going to be a big plus for us all. So that's a policy that I think is going to be a big win for everybody right across the board. But it's particularly going to help the cost of living because of that. That child care fee, or not the fee, but the costs.
Jordan, did you capture the question? We all witnessed you running away from Bernie there.
We've lost his audio. We've got to bring his audio in.
We've got no audio, mate.
We've got no audio.
Hold on, he's got himself.
The excuses some people use not to come up with an argument. It's just unbelievable. Huh?
Still no audio, Jordan.
He had cost of living and ran off.
He had cost of living. Maybe he didn't pay his bill.
Pay his internet bill.
Well, that's good. Well, half his bill anyway, because we can see him.
Bernie, who knew you were such a comedian?
Oh, well, you got to have a laugh, don't you? Oh, mate, I was in the Liberal Party for 40 years. If that doesn't make you laugh, nothing will.
Is he muted on our end, Darby? Just double check.
He's not muted on our end. Unfortunately, all of you are on one feed.
Nah, can't hear you yet, mate.
Do you speak sign language, Jordan?
No,
he's going to come back in.
We'll give
him off.
We'll give him a minute to come back in. So in the meantime, I'll just let the viewers know we're again. I can see your super chats. We're going to read them at the end. I hope you're enjoying the debate so far. I promise it's going to get more juicy because I'm going to force some fights. And some of you can ask some. If you've got a really good question that you think is going to show the difference between these parties, make sure to hit the super chats. Let us know. And we will put it to them at the end. I know a bunch of you are putting questions in the normal comments. That's not how this is going to work. Otherwise, I've got about 1 million questions I've got to run through. So if you've got a question that you want us to touch on for one or all the candidates, make sure to hit the super chats and do it. We can hear you now. Here you go, mate.
Audio.
Do you need to hear the question again?
I thought Bernie would have for sure been the boomer in this room, but it is apparently me. So my apologies. Rest assured, cost of living is libertarian bread and butter. We're very excited to answer those questions.
Okay, so do you need the question read again, or are you good?
If you could.
Rukshan.
Yeah, so the question, Jordan, was how would your party alleviate cost of living pressure for Australian families while also being economically responsible?
Well, I think that all of the cost of living measures the Libertarians would apply would be economically responsible because we'd be making corresponding or greater cuts to wasteful government spending and government overreach. So all of our sort of cost of living policies would be more than supported by things like abolishing the E-Safety Commission, making sweeping reforms to spending of all kinds. So there's more than enough fat to trim to deliver real cost of living savings to families. And of course, the most important way to deliver cost of living to families is tax reform, and real meaningful tax reform. Getting rid of tax brackets altogether, lowering our income tax rate to 20%, in addition to increasing the tax-free threshold to $50,000 per person, and making sure, as I think I heard Bernie say as I was coming in, that if you have a family situation where one parent is staying at home to care for the kids, their tax-free threshold is added to the family pool. So you've got $100,000 tax-free threshold on the family income. We'd also propose abolishing all excise, so not just cutting by 50%, as I know is the One Nation policy, but abolishing fuel excise, abolishing alcohol excise, and slashing tobacco excise to both deliver cost of living and get rid of organised crime.
I reckon just before we move on, I reckon you'd save a lot of money just getting rid of the E-Safety Commission, and not even on the cost of running the place. I think just on the legal bill every year must be in the millions. Anyways,
I sat in the Billboard Chris case recently in Melbourne at the Administrative Review Tribunal, and there were a lot of barristers and lawyers there getting paid.
Absolutely.
By the
I'm not even kidding. It's kind of a joke, but it's true. And I've been in a bit of litigation myself with them, and I can't believe how much money is being wasted there. Let's pick it up a little bit, and coming off the E-Safety Commissioner, who are we starting this one? I think we're starting with Bernie.
I think we're going to start this one with Warren.
Warren.
So Warren, how would your party protect citizens' privacy in the digital age?
Well, we'd make sure that anything going digital and having any of your information recorded digitally would always be an option. It would never be mandatory, because we've seen the failures even within, multi-billion-dollar corporations like Optus and there was a couple of other banks, wasn't there? NAB have suffered data breaches. So if these multi-billion-dollar corporations can't protect your data from breach, then what bloody hope has the fiscally illiterate Australian government got? Absolutely none. So, look, that's the key point. You can't make this stuff mandatory. And most of your audience know, and all of us gentlemen here all know, where the New World Order, or whatever you want to call it, the globalists would love this to go. The World Economic Forum, the UN, the WEF, ultimate control. And I think that's a whole lot easier if you create a digital prison. So we'd avoid that at all costs.
Jordan?
Sorry, I've got some enthusiastic friends gaming in the background, so if you hear some cursing and creative language, that's not libertarian policy. But look, when it comes to things,
you got Limerick around, have you?
No. Well, I don't know if David games or not. But look, when it comes to privacy and digital ID and getting rid of the ever-encroaching surveillance state, libertarians have been on the front lines of that for 23 years. This is not about protecting communities or children. It's about controlling you and controlling all of us and controlling the narrative. That's really what the government and the sort of globalist world masters, like the new WEF guy, who somehow looks even more like a Bond supervillain than the previous guy. I don't know how that's possible, but we would not just try to reform the E-Safety Commission, we'd be abolishing it. We'd be repealing recent encroachments on free speech, like the hate speech legislation. We think that voting on our principles against legislation like that is important, even where the outcome doesn't seem to be changeable.
And Bernie?
Well, one of the first things that go would be E. Karen. I mean, she's just out the door to start with. I think that's particularly important to make a point
Would you
on.
deport her back to America?
Well, if she look, I'm not sure. I think Canada probably. That she's more a Canadian than an American these days, I think, and she'd probably fit in better over there. But I don't particularly care where she goes as long as she's not here anymore. That would be my preference. But I think we've got to balance these things. We have to protect children from pornography, from a whole range of things that attacks the innocence of their childhood. that's I think a very high priority. Not I think I know a very high priority of Family First. But at the same time, we have to protect people's privacy. That's also very important. But we have to find a balance between the two.
Next question.
Next question is what reforms, and goes to Jordan, what reforms would your party pursue in Australia's education system?
So one of the extremist policies the ABC accused us of last night was abolishing the Federal Department of Education, as Donald Trump has now signed an executive order to do in the US. And that, if that's an extremist policy, then I am indeed an extremist. And I think we have a Department of Education federally that employs 0 teachers, teaches 0 children, and has overseen one of the largest declines in educational standards and performance in living memory. We have children who are being failed and falling behind in every key metric, be that English, maths, or science. And we know that a federal top-down approach has been tried for a long time. It was justified on the basis of synergy and all this stuff, but it's really just redistributing state money back to the states through this loss-making department that costs about $170 million a year just to run and contribute nothing. So we think that more money is not the solution. You can't just throw money at this. We need competitive federalism. We need states who are incentivized to create solutions that are right for their situation and compete with each other to become the greatest education state. Like when Queensland abolished death taxes, we want the first state to get education right to trigger a wave of interstate travel.
Thanks, mate. Bernie?
Well, it's a terrifying prospect of where we're heading, where kids, 33% of kids can't read and write. We've got 10% of teacher graduates who can't read and write. Now, how the hell can you be a teacher graduate and not be able to actually read and write? That is just astonishing. We need a revolution in education in this country. It's not working. It's just not working. When kids can go through 12 years of education and still not be able to put a sentence together properly, it's a pretty basic sort of thing. I agree totally with Jordan about getting rid of the Federal Department of Education. It does nothing. We can add the Federal Department of Health to that, the Federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs, and probably about 75% of the federal government from that point of view. But what we need is, as I say, is a revolution in education. We need to get this right. We need to fix it. We need to fix it now because kids are actually suffering as a result of it.
Warren?
Yeah, so I believe it's over 24 million a year or something federal budget for the education department, and we are falling outside the top 10 in basic numeracy and literacy for OECD countries. So that fact in itself is disgusting. We've seen 111% increase in people homeschooling in the last few years. We support that for those that wish to do that, and we'd encourage more people to do that, to be honest. Now, I'd also increase funding for alternative schools and whatnot, which we've seen a lot more of late. But realistically, we know there's a problem with the syllabus itself. We know the curriculum itself is broken and we need to fix it. So, there's woke ideology being pushed on kids in Christian schools, in private schools and everywhere, and that's got to stop, obviously. Look, realistically, let's just go back to the cornerstones of education, basic numeracy and literacy. And if your state education departments can't manage that, well, then maybe it's time to have a look at what they're actually doing with that money.
It's a great tragedy that kids can they know how to transition, they just don't know how to spell it.
Bernie, you're on fire tonight, mate. Which is unfortunate because you were at the bottom of my 3, and I feel like comedy gets you up there. Let's keep it moving a bit faster now, so we can get to some of the public ones. And I know we're going a bit over time. And okay, where were we? We were number 8.
We're up to no. Yeah, I'll throw this one to I think it's Bernie to start off with. Bernie, what's your party stance on foreign investments in Australian assets?
Well, I think it's one that's it's a curly one, because without foreign investment, we're probably going to be in a bit of strife. But at the same time, I don't want to see Australia owned by China, as we're seeing, and large sections of of Australia are owned by China, and you just have to look at, and it was the Liberals who did this, allowed the port of Darwin to be owned by the Chinese. Now, I would have thought if there's going to be anywhere you wouldn't want the Chinese, it'd be in Darwin. But there's a whole range of places that we need to have a look at and stop this from happening. We have to do this once again, and it comes back to the old thing of doing it. Doing whatever is in the best interests of Australia, and if we need to kick people out, if we need to relocate some of the land, or not relocate the land, but relocate the owners of that land, then that's something we really have to do.
Warren.
Yeah, so One Nation, look, it is a fickle issue, but the reality is we've been, selling the cow for far too long when we should have been selling the milk. We have things in this country that were once, vital assets for all future generations that we now buy back. So that firstly has got to stop, especially with the sale of vital assets to multinational companies like water, infrastructure, power lines, rail networks, highway networks. Like, even Transurban is in Melbourne. It's now the most profitable toll network on the planet. That's disgusting. You're not looking up. Yeah, well, you were around when that was implemented. Look, and housing alone, so international and foreign investment in housing, One Nation is saying that there shouldn't be. You should not be allowed if you're a foreign national. So we'd be giving people 2 years to sell their properties to an Australian, so as not to overburden the market and cause a whole different inflationary problem. But look, yeah, we oppose all types of foreign investment in the domestic housing market at this point.
Jordan.
We've lost him again.
You're on mute, buddy.
You're on mute, Jordan.
I can see that the people are calling for some disagreement, and this is one area where there is a divergence in libertarian policy. So libertarians don't believe the Australian government should own things, so we certainly don't believe foreign governments should own things. So we would have opposed the sale of key infrastructure to China or to Chinese-owned corporate entities. So we don't believe that where you've got foreign governments owning infrastructure and things like that should happen. But we believe that when it comes to foreign investment, and we look at this as an issue of the government shouldn't be able to tell Australians who they can sell their property to. If you want to sell your property to someone from China, then the government shouldn't be stepping in and telling you can't do that. Now, we think that when it comes to investment in domestic building, and this is a background I've got as a construction litigation solicitor, it would be impossible to build the kind of infrastructure that we need financially without foreign investment. And if we cut that off, we're going to be creating a whole heap of other problems down the track, as well as sovereign risk issues. So libertarians on the principle of property rights and the right of Australians to choose who they want to sell their property to or deal with. It's no different to saying that Australians should be able to sell their product to foreign companies or buy from foreign companies. This
is a point of difference, Bernie. I guess we found a point of difference, so I want to explore it a bit because that's what's helpful for people at home who are trying to work out in which order to put you guys. What would your answer be to that? What's your problem with Jordan's position or the libertarian position there?
Well, my point of difference and my concern is national security. I think if we have, and let's face facts, can we be brutally honest here? China is no friend of Australia. Nobody can claim with any justification at all that China is any friend of Australia. And if we allow China to take over our country, even by stealth, then we are failing as a government. We're failing as a parliament. Whoever whatever position we might be in, we're failing, and that's something that we cannot allow to happen.
So what would you say to that, Jordan? From a
potentially their enemies,
a national security point of view, where China goes out and buys out Australia, what would the libertarians do to protect Australia from that?
Again, when Bernie says China, what he means is presumably Chinese people. And I'm saying there's a difference between China as a country, as a government, a sovereign entity, and citizens of China who want to purchase property here. I think in the case of a war, hot or otherwise, The people who've bought property in Australia, they're buying that property because they want to get the fuck out of China. Sorry to use the language.
No,
You know,
no, they're not. No, they're not. That's nothing is
No, I don't think you can just say. I don't think you can just say that a whole nation of people shouldn't be able to buy property elsewhere in the world. Now, one of the comments in the chat did talk about the ability of Australians to buy property elsewhere, and I think that is a valid point. I think that the ability of foreign nationals to buy in Australia should, to a degree, be contingent on the idea of reciprocity. The idea that you should be in turn able to buy property in that country. Like, I think that's an appropriate lens to maybe put over it. But I don't think you can just say that China is inevitably going to be the enemy of the 21st century and ban foreign
How
ownership.
do you stop the CCP from engaging in state operators buying in and essentially then it being China, not just Chinese people?
Well, I think it's impossible to stop that, and it wouldn't matter what legislative
Isn't that
regime.
what Bernie's talking about?
Yeah, no, but he's talking about putting in place something which we know won't work because it's like saying, well, we'll just stop people from buying black market cigarettes.
I guess this is very similar. I guess this is very similar to the Muslim ban that he said before when it comes to immigration, and this is a point of difference. I guess this is where people can at home judge. What I'm understanding is Bernie's looking at these issues and saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bernie, and saying, well, the way that I'm going to deal with this problem, because we have two different problems, but the solution to the problem is something that is a big stamp that fixes it, because it reduces it. It takes away the threat of the problem. So something being able to go. So if there's a threat that in this case that China is as a state, as a bad faith actor coming in to buy out Australia for the state to own land in our sovereign country, that they would be using people. His way to do it is ban all. Is it foreign ownership or is it just China? What is it exactly?
No, just China. I mean, China is a communist country. Communism means that they control a lot of these companies, a lot of these corporations that own large chunks of Australian land and Australian businesses. If you are dealing with a Chinese company, you're dealing with the CCP. That's the bottom line, and unless we recognise that, and unless we are prepared
so would you be
to do
happy
something
if
about it.
would you be happy with a ban that stopped companies or Chinese companies where the CCP could essentially act through them, or is it any Chinese ownership because the threat is too big?
I think that the fact is that if it's a Chinese company, given the system of government that they have, it is controlled by the Chinese government. It's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and that's something we just have to accept. That's a fact, and I don't understand why people don't accept that.
Do you accept it, Jordan?
Well, I'm not saying that I don't accept that there are companies in China that are essentially state-owned companies, but what I'm telling you, Bernie, is that you have to understand you can have this ideal world where you can pass laws and say that it's what it's going to do, but I'm telling you that sure as God made green apples, to borrow a phrase, that it is not going to be effective. You're going to have intermediaries, you're going to have a shadow market, it is going to be impossible. And you're going to create all manner of other negative consequences. You're going to have empowering organised crime. You're going to have money laundering. You're going to have shadow economies, and it's just not viable.
You mean in the property market? You're saying that if you ban the Chinese, if you ban Chinese property sales or assets in Australia,
yes,
then there will be a shadow market.
Absolutely, of course. Like that is impossible not to be the case. Any government would be foolish as the government has been with their tobacco excise and de facto ban of cigarettes and ban of vaping, to think that they can just, with the sweeping stroke of a pen, make a law like that and have it not fail.
It's not like, I don't know, Bernie, what would you say to that? I just don't see property being like cigarettes. I get the argument.
No, well, that's right. We are talking here at some proproperties of large chunks of Australia. That's not something that you quibble over.
Bernie's hit a key point there. It's a multifaceted problem. It's the domestic housing sector is one component of it. Then we've got the vital assets like the commoditisation of water rights in the Murray-Darling Basin, which then ties straight into food security and everything else. Land assets, infrastructure assets, as I alluded to before, and them being owned by foreign corporations, foreign entities with guaranteed return on investments year on year. There's so many different components to this discussion that I don't think there is a one size fits all for the entire industry.
Would One Nation would One Nation? Clearly you're saying that you don't have a one size fits all. What would One Nation do? Is there a difference between the private sector to companies to
firstly, to address the problem, I disagree with Jordan. The governments shouldn't own anything, because the things that government own effectively for us, the people. We, the people, own those things. Like the SEC, when it was a good thing back in the 80s, that was a government-owned asset. That was an asset that was owned by the Australian people, generated a profit for the Australian people. And when I alluded to earlier about selling the cow and buying back the milk, that's what I mean. That was a vital asset that was to generate profit for all future generations of Australians, that was privatised and sold off. Look, I just think it's too big an issue to address in this space. But look, I think there's some valid points from both, and is it
fair to say, Jordan, you're saying free trade? The person selling the asset has the right to choose. Bernie's saying, yep, as long as they're in Australia, or definitely not to any Chinese, whether it's some of the bigger assets or just a private home. And Warren, you're saying you're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I'm also saying, given the opportunity, Australians should be buying back absolutely everything that we have sold to foreign entities.
Is that private? Is that private?
Years to do that.
Is that private housing as well? Because obviously
private housing, yeah, exactly. So no foreign entity should own housing in this country.
Foreign entities, you're talking about private Chinese owners as well.
Yeah, correct.
So you're very much like Bernie's position.
Similar.
Okay. All right, I think we got a point of difference there. That's 2 points of difference. We're getting there, guys. Rukshan, go ahead. I know you've been doing nothing, so go do something.
Next question, guys. We're almost at the end of the questions. There's a couple more to go. This one, I think we'll start with Warren, I believe. Would you change Australia's gun laws, and if so, how, in the Senate?
Look, we promote responsible gun ownership. Absolutely, hands down. I am a hunter myself, and it's already hard enough to actually get a gun license in this country. I don't think we need to make things any harder. I wouldn't necessarily say make them easier. I wouldn't actively go out of my way to change things. No.
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah, so I think that the National Firearms Agreement should be abolished. I think it was one of the greatest policy failures of the Howard government that they made the changes they did after Port Arthur. I think that was a pretext. Some people think it's a false flag. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that it was very convenient, and they were very, very quick to seize on public sentiment to make sweeping changes that I don't think in the cold light of day people would have agreed with or supported. I think that Australians need the right to protect themselves. I think that when we see all the failings of police law enforcement, the solution is not harsher laws or more police powers. The solution is the ability for citizens to defend themselves and their homes and their loved ones and their property. So I think that we support lawful firearm ownership, but it should be a simple, straightforward question of criminal record checks, health checks. I have been a firearms user before. I'm hopeful to be one again in future. And really, I think this comes down to a property rights question.
Bernie?
Look,
isn't this also
my view on this
largely a state issue, gentlemen?
Well, no, see, the problem is Howard made it. Sorry, Bernie, I don't want to take up your time, and maybe you can reset the time.
I'll reset the time.
It was a state issue that was then co-opted by the federal government under Howard, and using the framework of this National Firearms Agreement, it's basically been dictated to by the states, with special purpose grants used as this bait. And, we can see in WA, some states still have freedoms that they're now, wiping off. And really, it's just gone too far, and the federal government should be abolishing its control.
Bernie?
Look, I think what we have seen happening over recent years is probably inevitable in this country. But at the same time, my view is very clear: is if you have a legitimate reason to have a gun, then you should be allowed to have one, and you pass all the tests and
What's a
and
legitimate
you're
reason?
you're not
Self-defense?
loopy or whatever. No, I don't know if self-defense is legitimate. I think sport is legitimate. I think farming is legitimate. I think those sorts of reasons for having a gun, I think, is a fair and reasonable thing. I don't think that we should go down the American path. I don't believe that we need a gun in every home. I don't believe we need a lot of guns in every home. Although I have to say, if I was in America, I would have a gun. Absolutely. If I lived in America, I would have a gun because I'd be mad not to. I mean, you've got to have a gun over there for self-defense because why would you be the only person in the street without one?
Well,
But
in
we
the
certainly
since the
don't
election
want to.
campaign-
We don't want to go down that path. We don't want to
Well,
go down that path here.
Since the election campaign began, there's been at least 4 or 5 shootings, a couple of them fatal in Victoria. Nobody in Victoria who's a criminal and wants a gun doesn't have a gun.
Yeah.
And gun laws are just totally ineffective. Again, this is that theme of governments and politicians, and with great respect, Bernie, a lot of conservative politicians thinking that the laws they pass will dictate reality and that will dictate human behaviour. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, so it is an interesting point
Yeah,
of
we say
difference
we're
here.
very real problems.
Go on.
Look, and I'd go a little further in one component of this. So I've got a lot of my friends that have had their firearms taken off them, or they've had to hand them in simply because they've lost their license for driving offences and whatnot. Granted, drink driving or whatnot, but this mollycoddling, protecting us from ourselves has got to stop. Governments are encroached every facet of our lives, and if that's somebody's sport, that's somebody's hobby. They go hunting on the weekends, and they went off the rails. They did something they shouldn't have, say drink driving or whatnot. There's no correlation between that offence and them doing something stupid with a firearm when they've been a responsible gun owner for their entire life. So I think that's got to stop too.
Let me ask you, Bernie. So firstly, what I'm seeing here is Jordan's much more of an open to a open gun licensing policy as long as it's not going to crazy people. Warren, you're pretty happy with the way it is. You just want it to be a little not as policed, I guess, especially in Victoria. That's state by state. Like Victoria is very police, and it's in fact in the hands of the police, the LRD or whatever it's called. They're in charge of gun licensing and issuing all that. Bernie, you're happy with the way it is now. You're saying for legitimate, as long as someone needs it for legitimate reasons. I guess my question to you, Bernie, would be, I'm somebody that gets a lot of threats, and I live in an area where, like Jordan brought up.
I know that feeling, Harvey. I can tell you, I know that feeling.
So I would argue that a lot of criminals in Victoria do carry firearms, and all you got to do is ask any cops in the northern suburbs.
No question.
And so a lot of the people who threaten me are often armed, and I have had my experiences with the police, and I trust that they'll come after the situation has ended to mop up the issue. So my question to you would be, is it not a legitimate reason if somebody is really needing a gun for self-defense? And I get, we can argue who determines that, because I think everybody, it's very subjective, but shouldn't people have the right to defend themselves against those criminals that don't follow the laws by definition?
Yeah.
Don't follow the gun laws. Like, don't we have a right to protect ourselves, our family, our property?
I think if somebody's in that position where they are under direct and immediate threat, yes, they have the right to defend themselves. There's no question about that. But I don't think that the overwhelming majority of Australians are ever in that situation. They don't find themselves in that situation. For those who do, then they should have the right to protect themselves. And I remember years ago when I was still working in radio, when we had a guy who was doing a lot of stories in the mafia. We asked him about one day in the studio after an interview, what do you do? I mean, how do you stay alive? And he produced a revolver from his briefcase. Now, I had no problem with that because his life was in imminent danger every day. And I think for somebody in that situation, that's fair enough. But I don't think that should be a general rule for everyone.
So do you think there should be a criteria for? Do you believe there should be a criteria for self-defense in which people can apply to be able to?
I think that would be appropriate. I'm not sure what the criteria would be because I really haven't thought that through. But I think that I think there should be some criteria that should be met so that people could get firearms to actually defend themselves.
I'm assuming we're all open to legalizing pepper spray. Can we go there?
Yes.
At a bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely.
WA
But on
already.
Go on, Warren.
pepper spray, yeah. But on that point, to further elaborate on Bernie's point, so with my training in the military on assault rifles and whatnot, there is different levels of skill. There is different drills, and people are trained to different standards. And I think it raises another component that you'd have to consider putting into legislation: escalation of force. There needs to be a standardized practice on what constitutes reasonable escalation of force. And if you were to respond, and there was to be an inevitable, investigation thereafter, there needs to be a standardized, effectively, rules of engagement with regard to escalation of force. So again, you get into a very grey area. It's just not a black and white question at all.
I do, but I think there is a black and white question in the fact that do you believe that Australians should have the right to firearms from self-defence? And I agree with Jordan on this situation where conservatives...
I believe that's a yes. But as far as putting it into legislation, there are so many more grey areas that needed to be nutted out first.
But I do agree with Jordan that there is this problem on the right in Australia where they just think you can legislate gun laws, and they think that it's amazing the way we have it. And I think it's unrealistic, and they don't realise the reality of our gun problem here in Australia at the moment, and they don't realise the growing problem in the future that we're going to have, where we have a disarmed population but a super heavily armed criminal, many jihadis. When we talk about Bernie, when we talk about those people from those communities, they are armed to the teeth,
didn't we?
And I think we're going to see that come to a head at some point. And many conservatives bring up America as the example. I think it's the worst example. Why do they never talk about Israel? In Israel, the population. My sister has a Glock in. I think she walks around with all the time. And shooting,
but also, again, mate, to elaborate on that, through mandatory military service, albeit for a short time, everybody has a standardised set of training on basic.
I agree. Not my sister. My sister didn't. My sister didn't serve, and mind you, I would stay away from her now. I'm not visiting her on my next visit to Israel now that she's armed. No, but the point is, but they have to go to training. They have to train. They have to. It's actually a really strict. Gun licensing, it's not like America where you can just walk into Walmart and buy a gun in some places, but in Israel there is a strict thing, and you don't see the mass shootings that you see in America. There is a gun culture which respects the firearm as a protective tool. But I think there is a point of difference there, but it's not as wild as we originally thought. Rukshan, before you fall asleep.
I might make this like the last question from us, and I might combine two of the questions that we had together because they're all kind of pretty similar. So we'll start off with, I believe, Jordan. So this is to do with Australia's, presence in the international world, international relations. Obviously, with Trump around as well, and we've got tariffs, and it's something that the federal government deals with. But there are instances, perhaps these issues kind of come to the Senate as well, where you'd have to decide on some of these things. So when it comes to things like dealing with President Trump, we'd like to get your views on it as potential senators, as well as, your ideas about Australia's involvement in international wars and conflicts. So whether it's in Ukraine, in Israel and Gaza, how do you see Australia's role in that, and as well as the relationship with the United States of America, and of course one of our biggest trading partners in China as well, who might be having a trade war with the USA?
Well, with China and the USA, we've already seen the Chinese market has picked up the entire loss of the Australian beef export to America. The Chinese have just picked it up because of the tariffs that America's put on China. So, we're going to find alternative markets for our products. Tariffs aren't a concern. I think the government's got it right. There shouldn't be retaliatory tariffs. I think Trump shouldn't be judged based on his personality. He should be judged on a case-by-case on each action he takes. I think anyone who says, I agree with everything Donald Trump will ever do, with respect, that should be a more nuanced approach. You've got to really just assess on a case-by-case and take the personality out of it. Just deal with each case as it comes. And I think that's where our government often falls over. They're either, falling over themselves to agree with everything a particular leader says, or they're falling over themselves to paint them as the devil. And the truth lies somewhere in between. When it comes to foreign conflicts, I think that we've got a lot of problems at home, and Australians shouldn't be sending taxpayer funds to be involved in foreign conflict or foreign aid while we've got people suffering and struggling in Australia. You can't save a drowning person when you're struggling to swim yourself. And Australia has serious problems in our backyard. Libertarians believe that we should have a much, much narrower version or definition of national interest that should be focusing on defending our home against immediate threats and basically putting Australians first. There was a lot of talk about that earlier. Bernie's used that phraseology a lot tonight, that Australia first phraseology, and I think it should also apply to foreign relations. I don't think we should be obsessed with what Israel's doing or what we're doing over in the Ukraine. Richard Marles is in the seat of Corio in Geelong, and he's got one of the poorest socioeconomic electorates in Victoria, and he's going around touring the front line of the Ukraine and spending $1.1 billion in that conflict, and I think it's obscene.
Bernie?
Well, you're not going to get a point of difference on that one either, because quite frankly, I think it's obscene too. I can't for the life of me understand why we are involved in international conflicts that have absolutely nothing to do with us at all. That to my way of thinking, is just nuts. We can have friends without giving them everything that we have. We can have a friendly relationship with Israel, as indeed we should, without kicking in, millions and millions of dollars, or tens of millions, or hundreds of millions of dollars in weaponry. These things really have to be decided, as Jordan said, by what is in the best interests of Australia. And if it's not in the best interest of Australia, we shouldn't be doing it. It's as simple as that. It's not up to individual politicians to decide who their mates are and who to look after. This has to be about what is good for the entirety of Australia at any given time. And if we got to do that, really. We have to do that now.
And Bernie, sorry, you might have missed the first part of the question. What do you think about Australia's relationship with the US, the Trump administration? Do you think the federal government or opposition or the Labor government has got it right?
Yeah, I think if the United States wasn't as strong and as big and as bold and as friendly as it is, we'd all be speaking Chinese. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and I think that's something that we should keep in mind. That the United States is our most powerful and our strongest ally, and we'd be in more strife than the early settlers if we didn't have that relationship. It would be mad to put that at risk.
Warren?
Yeah, again, there's a few separate components here. Firstly, with our relationship to the US and Trump, strategic defense and foreign wars. So firstly, get Kevin Rudd. If your diplomatic liaison's pissed off the president of another country, it's probably time to pull him from that role. It's entirely his job to be diplomatic and he's ruined that. Pull him out. As far as trade with the US is concerned, obviously it's important for us. It's important to them. And I think the leaf to take out of Trump's book on this is that he's looking internally, looking back towards nationalism. We should be doing the same. We should be protecting our own at all costs, to be honest. We maintain that relationship with regard to our responsibilities regarding strategic defence. Absolutely, we have a unique obligation to pitch in when it comes to NATO forces deploying on operations and whatnot, peacekeeping or whatnot around the world, of which I've done much of myself, in order to hold up our end of the bargain should we need to, heaven forbid the time comes where we do need to lean on our friends. We want to know that we've held up our end of the bargain. And having said that, I do agree that we need to spend a little bit more on our budget and defence budget annually, because we are enormously vulnerable in this country in a way that people don't really understand unless they've seen it. As far as being involved in foreign conflicts or whatnot, there's also two components to this piece. If it is a NATO obligation, obviously, then we need to consider what part we play in said in conflict, and also there's again manufacturing. So with regard to supplying componentry to NATO forces and Five Eyes community, that is a key point in our manufacturing sector. We do build some components for F-35s and for EF-88 Oz-style rifles and service weaponry around the planet. And we have very little manufacturing left. So, if you want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, fill your boots. But I just think you can't be too ideologically driven. You've got to judge each case on its merit.
It looks like you scared Bernie off this time.
Just while we're waiting for Bernie to rejoin, one thing I would say is that I would push back a little bit on the idea Warren floated that we should be spending more on defence. I think that, and Warren probably, I think on reflection would agree with this, the waste and inefficiency we have in defence is incredible, especially in the HR logistics.
It's like every other government agency that's entrusted with the Australian people's money. Defence acquisitions is incredibly wasteful.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is that it's a little bit worse with defence because there's this idea that they're sort of almost immune or that they don't have the same culture of, accountability and efficiency, and they've been overtaken by this idea that, everything has to be outsourced. When I wasn't in the army for nearly as long as you were, Warren, but I remember recruitment was done in-house when I enlisted in 2005. And now it's all outsourced to HR. And apparently, by some accounts, it takes over 12 months for a recruitment cycle to finish. It's just incredible, like the waste. And I suspect if we unpacked what was under the hood in the AUKUS agreement, it will already balloon out to be far, far more than the hundreds of billions it's slated for. And I'm very skeptical we're ever going to get anything out of it. And decisions
around... I should elaborate and say I'd say that there needs to be more checks and balances in place to ensure that we're not allowing defence acquisitions to be corrupted the way in which it has and cause such waste.
Absolutely, but also I think too, by redefining what is in Australia's national interest, by prioritising actual defence rather than power projection, and I sort of think some of what you said about the idea that we have to kind of go along on these foreign adventures so that we can build up our capital with our allies, I disagree with that. I think that if we said, no, look, we're not going to join you on this foreign war in the Middle East, we're going to sit this one out because actually this really isn't anything to do with us. I don't think that would cost us as much as a lot of people like to say. I think America would respect a no from an ally that has always been there. And I think if we used the funding envelope we've got more efficiently, but also more clearly on what will work for the defence of Australia, we could have a world-class defence of our island nation.
That's the thing. We already do, mate. We are one of the best trained pound for pound defence forces on the planet. We just don't have the equipment to protect us.
Exactly. But Aussie soldiers do an amazing job with the shoestring, and that's a fantastic trait. But we shouldn't have to rely on the sort of ingenuity of our soldiers to scrap it together. They should be well supplied.
So, just clarifying here, Jordan, you would say no, don't join in any foreign conflicts and just build up the army here, the defence force here, so that when the conflict comes here, we don't have to rely on anyone else. Is that realistic? Are we going to be able to take on China if we need to?
I don't think we have to take on China. I think that we have to be able to defend ourselves and provide a credible deterrent.
Would we be able to defend ourselves from China if the day would come when they want to expand and invade for whatever reason, whether it's just the fact that we are an ally of America, whatever it is?
Well, I think that, yes, we can. And I think that's much less likely to happen if we're not perceived as simply automatically following America in everything in the region. And we've got American assets like Pine Gap, and, we've probably got some other things that we don't know about on Australian soil
But if you're not going to join them in their conflicts, are they going to? So the friendship that we have, where you have Pine Gap and you have the cross-military, will that exist? Is it not a package?
What about we put in a different context? What about a united crossbench in the Senate pushing back on globalist agendas between the two major parties? Are we better as an alliance together, or are we better at building our own defences as an individual?
So you agree with him, Warren, that you do want to build your own defences?
No. I'm saying we're better off looking after the foundations of the alliances that we have in the modern Western world.
Sure. Okay, so that's a big difference between them. Bernie, there is a point that you made there. You're saying, for example, take Israel because it's a hot topic and people get very emotional on each side of it, same as the Russia-Ukraine war. But there is a difference there, because when I look up what aid Australia has given Israel, there's not really any aid. They sell some weapons. Maybe I'm wrong here. there's no real aid to Israel. It's sales of weapons, and that's what the lefties get very upset about. Whereas Ukraine, it's a lot of actual aid. So my question to you would be, is there a difference in that? Like, do you you made it clear that you do believe in the alliance and the friendship, and just not
Yes, I do.
not spending taxpayer dollars on a foreign conflict, especially when it's not needed, which is essentially what is happening with Israel. So are you happy with what's going on with Israel, and is it the Ukraine conflict where you want to see us pulling back aid?
Yeah, look, I think I think it's ludicrous that we should be telling Israel what to do. Israel has the capacity to do anything it wants to do, and it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, fighting force in the world. So for us to be trying to dictate to Israel what to do and what not to do is quite ludicrous. But I think for us to be pouring money into the Ukraine conflict. Just baffles me. I think if there's a way out of it, well, let's find help a way out of it. But to be pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into it when people are living in tents on the outskirts of our major capital cities, then that's not on.
Do you agree with that one, Jordan? I'd say
So not just on the question of defence, but in foreign aid, we have some obscene line items that are basically ego vanity projects, while Australians basically are struggling with cost of groceries and fuel. So I
think Jordan would agree with me when I say that Penny Wong should stop sending our money to Middle Eastern terrorists.
Well, like, we would say that absolutely the UNWRA should not be receiving any of our taxpayer funds. Absolutely.
That is an interesting point here, is when you talk about the funding from Australian taxpayer funded, it's actually it's going to the Palestinians, not to the Israelis. But
look, so I would say that there is some Australian government defence subsidies and tenders that do support supply chains in the Israeli defence, in like F-35s and other things. So that does happen. It is relatively minor compared to the amount of material and money we've given to Ukraine.
Is that aid, or is that sold to?
So, what I'm saying is not so much that there's aid, but that there's Australian government money involved in defence contracts in military supply chains. So libertarians would. Well, what that means is that the Australian government is subsidising or offsetting costs in component parts and defence tenders and contracts. Libertarians would basically, we're not discriminating.
I think that's fine. I think I agree with you.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I've had conversation with a number of Jewish friends of mine, people like Gideon Rosner, and I've said, look, at the end of the day, it's in Israel's best interests for other countries to leave them alone. Similar to what Bernie said, I think that we shouldn't be getting involved in a conflict that we know our government fucks up things in our backyard where we can see what they're doing. I absolutely don't trust our government to pick winners and losers overseas.
No, I agree. It's funny because I look at the comments and it's so many people get enraged and stop sending money to Israel and barely mentioning Ukraine, but it's actually the opposite. You're probably right about those subsidies. I haven't looked at it. It must be so minor that I don't even see it. I agree with you. I don't think as a taxpayer fund, as taxpayers, Australians should have to subsidise any weapons. I think Israel can buy weapons, whatever, if they want to sell to Australian contractors. I think the lefties go nuts about the fact that we even sell to them. What's your take on that, Warren, before we go into the...
Sorry, guys, I'm very much distracted at the moment. It's been a very long day. But look, I'll touch on that last piece I just heard. And I think we've got to stop allowing ourselves to be dictated to by the emotions of the left. Let's be honest, they don't give a damn about strategic defence or national defence. They hate this country, and I think we have an obligation to protect them, even though they don't ask for our protection.
I feel like that was just like a little viral rant.
Was it?
Okay. I did like that ending. You just got frustrated with the conversation, and to be honest, I think I agree with you there. Whilst I think Australians, as conservatives, we need to keep in mind that our national interest is to have friends and is to make allies and to be on the right side, as in the side that believes in freedom and democracy. Even in Ukraine, like, I don't think Putin is the good guy. the people that have gone, Putin somehow is a good guy. I don't think we should be funding the Ukraine war, but I don't think Putin's on our side. Putin's not on our side. Putin's on China's side. Putin's on Putin's side.
Putin's on the side of his own national interest again,
exactly.
Like we said,
and you can't blame him for that. But he's not the good guy.
I think there is a movement around the world towards nationalism and looking after your own, and Australia's just not reading the room.
Yep, I agree. Well, let's go to some of the. Oh no, let's go before. Yes, super chats first, and then we'll go into the. Oh no, you get one question each to each other first. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Who do we want to start with the minute question? Rukshan, who's just sitting there laughing because he's waiting for somebody to send foreign aid to Sri Lanka.
That's what we got to work on. Guys. Foreign aid to Sri Lanka, please. No, I'm joking. Bernie, do you have any questions to ask any of the other two fellow candidates?
Well, I do actually. I'm very concerned. Well, I'm not concerned. I'm convinced that if the Liberals lose this election, the Liberal Party is just going to dissolve. It's going to implode. Now, what at that point in time do you propose that we do? As three Conservative parties, what do we do to replace the Liberal Party if it dies? And I'm pretty convinced that if they lose this election, they are going to die.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. I'd just say, both with what Avi said and what you just said just now, there are three of us in the room who are centre-right. Libertarians are not conservatives. Even though a lot of people in the Libertarian Party might describe themselves as conservatives, the Libertarian ideology is not a conservative ideology. It is a distinct ideology. But nevertheless, there is a big amount of overlap, especially in the federal level. And I've actually been on record as saying over the last 12 months that if I were elected, and obviously, we're all competing for probably the same spot, but in terms of cooperation with other minor parties, like if I was elected, for example, Bernie and Lyle in New South Wales was elected and we were talking about family first libertarian cooperation, I would like to think that there would be many, many areas at a federal level where we would have more in common than not. And I think that there should be more coordination on the crossbench. I think the biggest weakness we've seen in the crossbench, we've had some great performers, be it Rennick, Malcolm Roberts, Babbitt on occasions and others. I think that we need to have more cooperation. We need to have more formal negotiation and bargaining power. We need to have a freedom crossbench, a freedom caucus. The parties are distinct and should remain distinct. I don't think we should be merging into one party, but I think we can and should cooperate both at elections more than we have this time and if elected in Parliament.
Warren?
Yeah, look, I think in that eventuality we'd have no choice but to work together because ultimately, regardless of whether you guys are not conservative or whatever you call yourselves as libertarians, the point is we are all trying to pull the Liberal Party back to its conservative base because we are not getting the opposition that we deserve in this country. And I do also agree that if that party fails to secure victory at this election, then they are very much at risk of becoming a minor party themselves. Look, and I feel like we'll just have to address that when it comes. But the reality is when you talk about alliances are very fragile unless people do the right thing and, act with integrity, which will lead me to my own question, if you don't mind, lads. Bernie, do you and your party, noting your preferences to the Liberal Party at number 2, consider yourselves to be a freedom-friendly minor party?
Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do, Warren. We had two objectives in this election, and we still do have two objectives in this election. The first one is to gain parliamentary representation for Family First, and that is obviously something that we're still very keen on. And the other objective is to defeat the Albanese government. Now, the Liberal Party came to us with a proposition which would considerably have improved both circumstances, both possibilities, and we, on that basis, had absolutely no qualms about accepting that, because we do want representation for Family First in the federal Parliament, and we want to defeat this government, this wretched, stinking government that we have. And I think that if the Liberal Party had come to you, or it had come to Jordan, that you probably would have got they probably would have got a very, very similar response, because we're not running to lose.
My question is,
we prioritise.
So my question is on the same topic, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it like a gauntlet on you, Bernie, but
This
we
is
got
why
number
we came
three.
here tonight.
Yeah, we got number 3 on the
Yeah,
Liberals.
we've been
No,
hanging
just
around here for 2
sorry,
hours
that's
waiting
right.
for this.
I haven't asked a question yet. That's right. But so we got number 3 on the Liberals Senate ticket in Victoria.
Mhm,
We didn't give them anything in the Senate. They're not on our Senate
Yep.
how to vote card. In the lower house, come what may, I know in some places One Nation's decided they're going to preference Liberals second or whatever to help support in the lower house the defeat of the Albanese government. In the upper house, in the Senate, where all of us, the 3 of us here now, have a chance to win a Senate seat, my question is, are you seriously telling me that you think, and your party thinks, Kyle Hoppert, the number 3 Liberal Senate holder, would be a better senator than Warren or I if you weren't elected? Is that what you think?
What I think is that I like Kyle. I know Kyle very well, and Kyle is a very solid conservative. I'd really like him to be elected if I wasn't. But that's
Above Warren and I?
Sorry.
Above Warren and I, which is the effect of your preferences?
Well, I think given his views on issues, they are certainly a lot closer to Family First than certainly yourself, Jordan.
But when you were a Liberal upper house member in the state parliament, it didn't matter what your views were because you either had to abstain or toe the party line. You didn't cross the floor.
Or cross the floor as I did on the conversion therapy bill.
I somehow very much doubt that a backbencher third ticket holder in the coalition would cross the floor on key issues in the federal Senate. It takes a very bold.
I'm hoping we don't find out. I'm hoping that those preferences will get me across the line. That's what I'm hoping.
And unfortunately, if they don't, it'll just have to mean that we just have to hope Family First gets a very low first preference, so it doesn't matter to us either. But it's disappointing.
This tends to be the conversation every election, and there always seems to be outrage about the preferences, especially within the minor parties. But even in the main 2 parties today, we saw Labor preferencing.
There's always a couple of parties that act with pure integrity every single time too.
So we have seen Trumpets of Patriots today calling you guys evil, I think to justify the some of the preferences. But I think it is important for people to remember at home, the parties don't actually pick their own preferences. I know as somebody,
exactly right.
When you run, of course, people follow the how to vote card. Most people follow the how to vote card because they just trust whoever they're voting for. But to the majority of people watching this, I doubt any of them are looking at the how to vote cards. In fact, they're probably making the decision partly because of the integrity of how to vote cards. But it is an issue.
Can I just point out on that question of integrity, the only guarantees that I gave anybody on preferences was that we would preference the Greens last. And that's mission accomplished. I mean, that's what we have done. I gave no guarantees to anybody because I was in no position to.
You're right, you didn't, Bernie, but it harks back to my initial question of, do you consider yourself a freedom-friendly minor party? And if you do, then you understand the only way that this alliance works is that every party acts with integrity. And you did to the only thing you promised, not to the unwritten integrity that we've agreed upon if we were to have some sort of alliance. So look, I'm not angry, mate. I'm just disappointed is all.
At the end of the day, I think anyone watching this who likes the cut of Bernie's jib and wants to put in 1, 2, or 3 or whatever, do that, but don't put the Liberals number 2. Put the 3 of us top 3.
Well, that is
absolutely.
That's up to people to decide. I mean, these are recommendations that we've made as a result of an agreement that we have with the Liberals.
So can I ask you that? Can I ask you that, Benny? Is it because of the agreement you made with the Liberals so that they preference you, or do you think that the Liberals would be a better truly a better senator option than both Warren and Jordan, or either Warren or Jordan?
Well, I think Kyle Hoppert would be certainly on par with those two. Absolutely, I think he would. But we made this decision based on the agreement. It wasn't we didn't discuss individual cases, although there were a couple of candidates that we weren't all that thrilled with. But at the end of the day, we agreed that as was put to me by a senior Liberal, 2 for 2. and that's what they came to us. We didn't go to them; they came to us, and we saw this
Did you try and
as an
kick him around and say, how about a 2 for a 4 and kick him down the list a bit? Or did you just go, yep, done?
No, we discussed it among ourselves for a couple of days actually, and I think the Liberals are getting a bit toey actually toward the end, but you know,
Why did you not tell the other minor parties early
at-
on, mate? Knowing that we'd
Sorry?
probably have you on our how to vote somewhere and that we were already at print was probably, a
Well,
common courtesy to tell other minor parties.
this didn't happen until almost the last minute. I mean, you know, this it didn't. This isn't something we've been talking about for months. This is something that came out of the blue, out of a phone call from a very senior Liberal to our national campaign director. And that was the discussion that was had, and we kicked it around ourselves for quite some time before deciding. And I know that Jack Snelling was arguing with his own conscience about whether we should do this or not do this. But at the end of the day,
that's it right there, mate. If a man's own conscience is stepping in, and if he's conflicted, then he's about to make the wrong decision.
no, but at the end of the day, it was decided that it would meet our aims of getting parliamentary representation and defeating the Albanese government.
I think
without-
probably in
the
fact,
fails of both was that
probably
the rest you'll get today.
Talk one
I
at a
think
time.
I think people probably have had the opportunity to kind of hear both sides.
Yeah, that's fine. And I do also think on top of all of this, it is important to remember last state election, there was big controversy about the Libertarians themselves with the other minor freedom parties that were having a blue about the preferences as well. It's one of those things I think the viewers here have watched can take from this whatever they want. When it comes to policy, I think that I guess I have one question for most of you, for all three of you, but especially for Warren and Bernie, because when we looked at the policies, when we've heard the policies tonight and we've tried to find policies where there is a point of difference, and we're going to go through the super chats real quickly in a second, but a lot of people always ask, so there's two things that happen in election time. They go, one, there's the argument about preferences, because obviously there are deals made with the Liberal parties, even though these are minor parties. And then the second one is where people, I've just gone blank in my mind. Gosh, you're not the only tired ones here tonight. Oh no, people always ask, why don't you join together and become one force? Quickly, Warren, why don't you do that?
Two reasons. Firstly, yeah, there is a lot of crossover, but I think there is enough of these minor differences, as we've even seen tonight through these minor differences, that they would inevitably cause a problem down the track. Jordan and his party themselves aren't actually conservative. They are libertarian, so there is some key differences there that would likely cause a problem. Now, furthermore, if we're all suffering the illusion that the echo chamber of the educated out there and your viewers here tonight outside of that, people are paying attention. All right. So if we all merged together and called ourselves the conservative minor party united, the One Nation, the loyal One Nation voters that vote for One Nation, that aren't following along with politics every day of their life, do not follow political commentators on social media, are going to walk in and go, well, who's this? Where's One Nation? I'm here to vote for One Nation, and they're not on my ballot. So we'd get lost in the noise.
Jordan?
So I think that the problem with if we all just unified together is that we would become no different to the Liberal Party. You know, there's been a few I've seen in the chat. There's been comments saying, "Oh, the Liberal Party are conservative." Well, that's not true. The Liberal Party have always been classical liberal libertarian and conservative. Those twin traditions. When Menzies brought the party together, that was what set the Liberal Party up for success for so long. And under Howard, he understood that. If we just merged and made it so that it was, one nation, family first, people first, whatever, all together in one mushed in thing, all we would be about is getting elected and nothing else, and just winning power.
Well, I've got to say that I'd be more inclined to sit down with Warren and have a discussion about this sort of thing rather than the Libertarians, because I think we have and Jordan is right. The Libertarians are not conservatives. I misspoke perhaps a little earlier. But they're not conservatives. They may be right of centre on a lot of issues, and we would agree with them on a lot of issues. But there are some fundamental issues with which we would have some considerable disagreement. and that would cause no end of trouble. I mean, we would just never be able to sit in the same room as them.
What can you give us
much less
just a
as the
couple
same
of those
party.
issues? Can you give us a couple of those issues just in case we didn't touch on them? What are the
Abortion and euthanasia.
Look,
And
also
Probably drug policy as well.
and drugs as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the
And,
other big one.
and that's not, when Bernie says that, it's not a criticism. Like, he's not, like, as in the sense we disagree, but he's not, saying that means we're bad people or enemies of his for life or anything. It just means that there are crucial issues on which we approach things from a different perspective. And
Yep.
I think it's healthy and beneficial for there to be that spectrum of views across the minor right. So,
All right.
Yep.
All right, quickly, let's go through the super chats. There's a couple of questions there and a couple of comments, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for staying so much longer than we had.
don't get our closing as well.
We'll do the closing right after this. Sorry.
That's it. Just
Why
happened in the
has
60s.
FF gone to 2 on the uni parties on the HTVs, how to vote cards? So
I think we covered that.
That's what we've just covered.
Yeah, we
So
addressed
thank
that.
you, Rob, for that super chat. And super chats, guys, you still have a minute or so till I get to the bottom, so you can go to mine and Rukshan's super chats and throw in a message or a comment. From Catherine, she says,
Nothing. Just a super chat.
Just want to
There
give
you
us
go.
money. Thank you. She knows how to treat a Jew well. Swagger says, what constitutes a woman? Let's go in light of the UK government finding this week. What a crazy world we live in. Great show. Thank you. But yeah, what's a woman, Warren?
biological female.
Jordan?
Adult human female, and thankfully the UK Supreme Court agrees.
Bernie?
Yep. And we are as one on this, an adult human female, and I'm with a High Court too.
But Bernie, what if I wanted an abortion? Can I have an abortion?
No, I don't think you can. You'd have to be pregnant first, and it's not possible for men to get pregnant.
All right, that's just hate speech. Okay.
I mean, isn't it bloody ridiculous that we have to go to court to decide these things? I mean, what happened to common sense in this world?
That's right.
Yes, I know. What if it's a Muslim family? Would Bernie and the family first put Muslim families last by banning them entering Australia? I'm not sure exactly what
That was to do with immigration. So
it was with the
would we
immigration.
ban?
Thank you for the support. I don't know. I'll read it out. You can answer it how you want. What if it's a Muslim family? Would Bernie and family first put Muslim families last by banning them entering Australia?
At this moment, we'd put Australia first.
Okay.
And that's what we're on about. I mean, we're talking about Australia. We're not talking about facilitating friendliness with anybody else. This is all about Australia and protecting Australians. And if we don't do that, we're not doing our job. And I should point out that Australians are of many colours, of many backgrounds, of many religions, including Muslims.
But you do think that for the time being, there should be an Islamic ban. That's the policy.
Until such time as things calm down, yes.
Okay, so we got Sonic Boom says, during COVID, Aussies were sacked, silenced, bashed by police, and segregated. Will you hold those in power at the time accountable, including jail time for rights breaches? And hold on, I read too slowly, or that was a long message. Rights breaches and fast track justice and back pay for victims. Warren, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, look, I think it's evident by the fact that One Nation is and has continued to lead this charge federally, and I will continue to take up that tradition until those people, those traitors are brought to justice.
Jordan?
Yeah, we need a real royal commission with teeth that includes investigation into the state's actions during COVID, and we need those findings to bring people to justice, and we most likely would see criminal charges, I suspect.
Bernie?
No doubt. If I'm elected to the Senate, one of the very first things I will do will be to try to bring that Royal Commission that Jordan spoke of into fruition, because we desperately need it. We need justice, particularly for Victorians. You know, we were treated abysmally for years by a despot. And that is something that I haven't recovered from, and I think there's a lot of Victorians still who are not recovering from that, and we need that Royal Commission to give us justice so that we can see perhaps some of those people locked up.
You're not going to get an argument from anyone here on the panel. Smoking man vibes. He says, considering most of these minority parties agree on 95% of issues, shouldn't they just form a party that third?
Yeah, I think we covered that.
We covered it. Thanks, you for your support. Smoking man vibe. Was that in support of you, Jordan? Jordan Street. Anyways, it looks like it's your support.
I think it means majority, major party, third major party. I think it's just Jordan. Yeah.
Thank you for the support. Smoking man vibes. Hopefully it's fully legal, or you've got a medicinal license to be smoking whatever it is you're smoking. Sonic Boom again. Thank you for your generosity. That's 2 rather large super chats. So thank you. Will you support introducing castle law in Australia, giving homeowners the clear legal right to defend, again, a nice long one, defend themselves and their family and their property without fear of a dragged out prosecution, potentially costing them thousands of dollars. We kind of covered it, but yeah, castle law. Do you support that, Warren?
Yeah, and look, nod, wink, wink. I think we're already seeing evidence of people doing that in their own homes and making sure the perpetrators are left on the footpath out front and going, geez, I don't know. And I think the police that agree with that are going, well, we just found this guy here, whatever.
Jordan, Jordan, I saw you. Big yes.
Yeah.
Bernie.
If people find intruders in their home, they have an absolute right to defend themselves. Absolute right.
Melissa says, after COVID overreach, why add more laws on guns, property, or foreign buyers? Isn't more law just more power for the government to misuse later? Warren, what do you say to that?
Look, it is a constant balancing act, introducing new laws and understanding the flow-on implications and how they might be deliberately misused or abused. So, look, I wouldn't say necessarily, so long as you implement these through careful debate and dialogue on how they might be abused and ensure that they are in the best interest of Australians. Look, we can't just not have laws.
But who was it? It was James Packer who basically in a Senate inquiry.
It was Kerry.
Basically said for every law you introduce, you repeal one. Would you agree with that, Warren?
Yes, absolutely. I would.
No, I've got it in the back of my head that I think you could waste utilize an entire members bill and come up with 50 ridiculous out-of-date laws
to repeal.
Have them guillotined. See you later. Done. Good use of a private members bill. There's 10 more laws a day that people aren't breaking completely unbeknown to themselves.
I'd support that, Warren. Absolutely.
So
you got my vote.
Obviously, I think people would imagine that a libertarian would support this, but the thing is with libertarians, we're like in the Lord of the Rings. We want to throw the one ring, which is government, into the fires of Mount Doom. We don't want to use it for good. We can't use it to achieve our aims. It's going to corrupt us eventually, and we want to get rid of it. We want to get into power and smash the levers, not pull them in a different direction.
And Bernie, for you on Melissa's comment, question, are more laws just more power to the government to misuse?
Well, I think what we should have done back in the Kennett days, and I offered Jeff the opportunity to do this, is to wipe out a lot of the laws that had come in the previous decade, and I offered to sit in a corner with a card table and a red pen, and I would do it myself. This is what we need to do. We need to get rid of these stinking laws that are holding us up as a free nation, and we've got to, instead of pushing laws through just for the sake of pushing laws through, we have to take into consideration exactly the impact that they will have on Australians and particularly families. And I will move, if I'm a senator, I will move that we have a family impact statement on every piece of legislation that's before the Senate.
Let's we've just got a couple more here. Melissa had another one where she said,
I'm really out of time. I've got calls that I have to make. I've got trying to manage 38 lower house campaigns on top of my own.
We'll let you do you want to do your minute, just your minute closing?
Yeah, okay, please.
Go.
So, One Nation Party, you understand what we stand for, you understand where we are and the direction that we're going. I firmly believe that we are the primary vehicle that is a catalyst for change in this country. Look, but I'm not going to simply advocate for the One Nation Party. I'd recommend anyone get out there and actually hand out in pre-poll for the party that best represents your value set. Don't follow the how to vote card if you want. Just research individuals and make sure you put the three of these gentlemen, including myself, in your top three, and ensure we go to Liberal because we know this. Regardless, we're going to end up with a minority government. So don't give a major party your 1, 2, or 3. Vote for the 3 or 4 minor parties that you'd like to see them form government with, because there's a certain inevitability to that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Warren,
Thank
for
you for your
sticking
time.
around. Sorry about for taking so much longer than we
Yeah,
thought.
no,
It
thank
was
you,
a great
guys. Appreciate your
conversation.
time. I've got a lot to do still.
Go
Thanks.
for it.
No.
Guys.
We had a, what did we have? We had that there we go. That's for you, Warren. We'll just quickly finish these super chats and the last. You can go, Warren. Yep. This super chat from
Preston
was, can all candidates who are preferencing freedom item parties above the uni party on the how to vote cards please raise their hand? So we talked about that. Thank you, Preston, for your.
And in fairness, Warren would have raised his hand as well.
Warren did. Warren left. He doesn't get to raise his hand. What did we have here? We had from Regional Rap. Thank you for your super chat. What are the views on the creation of New South Wales Central and North Queensland, Riviera, New England?
Yeah, the Libertarian Party absolutely supports the creation of more and smaller states. The Rexit movement, which Tim Quilty, our former state member, has talked about a lot, is, I think, something I understand a lot better, having been to a lot of the border areas. I was in Mildura the other week, and it's like a different planet compared to Melbourne. It's as far away from Melbourne as you could be and still be in Victoria, and it's got a lot more in common with the border, the other side of the border. So absolutely, that very wealthy, very unloved by Sydney and Melbourne strip along the border, Murray, the Riverina State, Rexit, absolutely.
Thank goodness you knew what he was talking about, because I had no clue. Bernie, do you have a view on that?
Well, I do have a view, and I think that again we're in agreement on that, because I'm a country boy originally from down near Colac, and whilst I don't think it would be appropriate down there, I think as you say, on the border, it really is. It's presents some real difficulties the way things are set up at the moment, and I have given a promise to my friends in Mildura that I will return there. I was there about a month ago, and I'll be back there again, hopefully as a senator in the not too distant future, to discuss these very issues that we need to look at.
Mr. 18280, thank you for your super chat support. Dan, what about our government giving China its own secret airport in Western Australia to import whatever it wants? Major compromise for our country. I think it's more of a comment. I think we've done it. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that point? No. No. Thanks, Dan, for your super chat. And the last one I have here is from Kieran. Why do the cops move on some people and not others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the biggest problems we see in Victoria Police is this two-tier policing where, the way the law applies to you depends on what you're protesting about. In COVID, we saw a very different approach to the Black Lives Matter protest versus the very similar subsequent, which I know you, Rukshan, and you, Avi, were involved in some of those early protests. And it was dealt with very differently by the police. So I think that's a huge problem. Rule of law means the rule of law should apply to everyone, including the government, including the police, and all citizens equally.
Bernie?
Well, look, I think this is a major issue. It's more a state issue than a federal issue, I have to say. But the fact of the matter is that the politicisation of our police force in Victoria is a disgrace. It is an outrage, and it's got to stop. It'll be interesting to see who's going to be appointed as Chief Commissioner. because there are two. There are two positions. There are two positions that Labor governments always take upon assuming office. One is the Chief Commissioner's job, and the other one's Governor. Now we know that they've got the Governor's job well and truly stitched up, but I'm going to be very interested to see exactly who they're going to appoint as Chief Commissioner, because that's how they control the police force, and that's what they did during COVID. And it was an outrage, as I say, and I was appalled by it.
Well, Jordan, your turn to give us your minute closing.
Yeah, look, I think that what we've heard tonight is that there are a lot of areas that we agree. So the point I want to make in my closing comments aren't about policy. It's about attitude and goals over the next 3 years. We are almost certainly looking at a re-elected Albanese government. I don't think it'll be a minority. I think it'll either be the same or an increased majority. And the Liberal Party is going to take all the wrong lessons from that. In 2028, we are not going to be able to rely on a better Liberal Party than we have now. It's going to be worse. So if I'm elected to the Senate, I'm young, I'm 38, I'm hungry, I'm hardworking, I've been campaigning hard for the last 13 months, and I'll hit the ground running in Canberra to fight for you and also fight for the future we need. We need to be starting the work day one, Sunday, May 4th. We need to start the work to get lower house candidates and get winnable spots to start winning lower house seats and seize the balance of power. And we can't improve the Liberal Party. We need to replace them.
I loved it. And Bernie.
Yeah, look, I agree. We do need to replace the Liberal Party. I think the Liberal Party is dead in Victoria in particular. I think it's a real mess, and from what I hear today, it's going to get worse over the next few weeks. It's really going to get right out of hand. But what we need in Victoria is some dedication, some commitment, some leadership, and some experience. And I believe I have all of that to be the senator that Victoria needs. And I am totally committed to going into the Senate and fighting for the needs of Victorians, but also fighting for those principles that have been deserted by the Victorian government in particular, but also the federal government as well. And I personally think that the Labor will be re-elected. I think it will be the Senate will be such an important chamber that we do need people with the sort of experience that I have, with the ability to speak up and to fight the way that I do. And I'm very much looking forward to doing the right thing as a senator, not just for the people of Victoria, but for all of Australia.
Well, on behalf of everyone, we've got one more. Kieran just added a question. He says, are we scared of Muslims? That's a follow-on from his question as why they move on some people. I guess, do you want to answer that, Bernie? Do you think the police are scared of them?
Well, I don't know whether the police are scared of them or not, but I have friends who are Muslims. I have some very, very good friends who are Muslims, and I'm not afraid of them. But it does worry me. It does worry me that there are some of them who want to kill us. And I don't want to be I don't want to be holding an inquest after the event. I don't want that to happen. I want to see if we can prevent somebody losing their life, as we saw and as we've seen a number of times around Australia of recent years. This is a major threat, and it's something that we can't avoid. We can't avoid facing. If we avoid facing it, well, we've just completely failed.
Jordan, anything you'd like to add? Your mic's down again.
I've got a slightly different take on this question, and I don't think it's a question of being scared of Muslims in the literal sense. I think it goes back to that question of two-tier policing, which was the previous question follows on from, where police are scared to actually apply the law consistently to groups that are perceived by this woke intersectional mess we're in as outside the law, or that they should have different laws applied to them. And that shouldn't be true of anyone in Australia, of any group, whether it be the Jewish community, whether it be the Muslim community, whether it be the Christian community. The law applies to all equally, and that protects all of us equally. At the moment we start making exceptions, and the moment we start being afraid to enforce the law, that's when we really find a lot of the problems that we've got now.
I agree with you on that. And we've got Preston who's enjoyed the stream. A lot of people enjoyed the stream. A lot less hate I got this time, Rukshan. I'm used to copying more hate. I think people enjoyed the fact that you didn't talk, I didn't talk, and we just we let them talk, and I was doing the digital. But
I just
really,
wanted to,
go.
I just wanted to let them talk. I wanted to hear from them because those opportunities to hear from these guys are few and far between. So it's very important that I think people hear from them and what they say. And I just love to reiterate that.
You've given us a lot more of a platform than Sky News has for the last 13 months. Bernie's been campaigning almost as long as I have, and it's pretty shocking. Pretty shocking
Even
how little.
Even Sky News is shocking. Like it would be great to have like a debate. Imagine a debate with Peter Dutton, let's say Albanese, Pauline Hanson representing One Nation, and maybe someone from the Libertarian Party representing them, and just to have those ideas hatched out in front of the Australian people, because I think people just get these same two ideas from the Uni Party, and we've just heard such a variation of ideas for the future of our country, and a lot of people don't know that this exists and this is an option, and I think the more the work that we do to get it out there to the masses is so important for the future of our country, because I think you guys, these minor parties, are the future of our country in terms of holding back a lot of the things that are going to be changing and making the positive changes as well for what many people, the unheard Australians, are really pushing for. So, I commend you guys for running for the Senate, of course, and also for coming on our show and supporting independent media.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. We'll let you guys go. So, Bernie, we promised you an hour and we're on 2 hours and 40 minutes. So really appreciate your time and good luck in the in the campaigning until the very last day, and good luck in the election. I wish all three of you the most success, and I know only one of you can win, but I hope one of you does win.
That would be good. Thanks for that, gents. I appreciate it enormously.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Rukshan,
that went pretty long.
Yeah, that went for ages, but it was good.
It's good though.
It was good. So the big points of difference, and I've got a couple more super chats I'll bring up on the screen. Just I thought, I can answer them myself because, I might as well do this one here. Sonic Boom, who's done. This is the third generous super chat, so thank you so much.
I hope he's sending the super chats to me, not to you.
I don't even know which one it's on, but that's all right. Whoever it is, unlike you, I support it. Will you take action to remove woke indoctrination and sexually explicit material? Hold on, so it's too short for Sonic Boom. Material from children's library sections and classrooms, and ensure content is age appropriate and educational. I think all three of them had very similar views on that stuff, so that's why we avoided it. Although now that I think about it, the libertarians have a funny view sometimes on that stuff, so we could have. We could have.
They're very much pro-choice for the individuals.
They're pro-choice, I know, but it depends adults. Which libertarian. Because I remember, like we had Limbrick on, and Limbrick
and Babbitt
defended it, whereas the Sydney guys didn't. So it would have been interesting, to be honest. Sorry, I should have asked him. I just felt really bad. It was 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I could see how tired they were coming on originally. We also had word from Rob, who was saying, Rukshan and Avi, how are each of you voting?
Oh.
Rukshan, you're going for Lydia, is it?
I think Lydia 1 and Payman 2. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I can tell you this: those three are in my top. Those are my top three.
Top three, yeah.
Definitely. I'm not 100% sure which one I would.
Well, I'm not sure what country they represent.
Who, Lydia or?
Well, I don't know what Lydia represents.
No, I'm saying these. I'm saying drawing One Nation, Libertarian, and Family First are my top three.
Your top three, yeah.
In what order? To be honest, I'm thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like tonight, actually, for me. So, what was the point of difference that we got here? There was like really three things, right? There was. Let's just go through it because the rest of it was that they were pretty much the same.
They're very similar.
There was three issues in which there was a point of difference. Do you remember them?
I think it's
Protecting the borders. So
yes, there was a
he
difference.
wanted Bernie had that's a pretty radical view, and it's like more radical than
Yep.
even
One nation.
than One Nation, and that Trump once had the Islamic ban, because the Muslim ban, what it was called back then, was
was just
actually
certain
certain countries where there was
Yeah.
high terrorism.
Whether it was extremism, terrorism,
Yeah,
wars.
high extremism. High rates of extremism and terrorists that come out of there. Like, I just don't think that policy of Muslim ban itself is practical. Like, how do you do that? Which is what I was trying to get at. Like, I understand the threat. I understand it more than most.
Yeah.
I think that a policy, to be honest, if they ever got it, like, it would have to be more thought out. And there are countries that, you know, they are not all the same. There is a lot of cultural thing in it as well. So, like, if you look at the United Arab Emirates and you compare your average Muslim in the United Arab Emirates to your average Muslim in Gaza, they're completely different. One is from a radicalized society and a culture, and the other is like an educated, he treats his religion a bit like how Jews and Christians treat their religion. Like, you don't have to like their idea. You don't have to like that religion. You don't have to sign up for it. But and to be honest, I learnt this nuance after Trump's Abraham Accords, and when I actually got to see him. Who's talking to you there? What are you doing?
I'm looking at you.
Oh, stop looking at me. So that was one
That
point
was
of
one, yeah.
That was one point of
I
difference.
think the other one was
And to
foreign
be fair,
investment.
and to be fair on that one, I kind of sit more with the like One Nation and Australian First than
Which one? Which one?
with
The Muslim guy.
migration with the borders. I get what Australian First is trying to do. I don't think his solution is practical, but I do kind of agree more with. I think he recognises the threat that the libertarians maybe struggle to see.
Yes.
So I'm probably with One Nation and family.
I personally don't think the demographics of the country and the voting patterns would allow for such a thing to pass. I'd like that. I'm just being realistic.
Sure, but I'm just trying to unpack policy differences and what would change my.
Of course.
My difference. What was the other one?
The next one was foreign investments in Australia.
That was
I think
a big
we saw
difference.
there. That was a big one, yeah.
And
so
I
the
totally am
libertarians-
with the. I'm actually totally with Australia
Bernie?
First and
family first. First.
Family First.
It's been a long day.
I know. Family First and One Nation on that one. I think. I think that's kind of, and that's why I wish I actually asked him about the children's material, because
Gender.
it's kind of, that's where I feel the libertarians get a bit lost, because they feel so strong about people's right to their own
Make choices.
their own choices, but then they don't see the bigger picture in which it affects everyone else, and so or also like the dangers, the dangers to the children, the dangers to national security in that case.
Yeah.
So again, that's one where
But Jordan did make the point, like, it's sometimes hard to police these things, and a black market does appear. It's almost like the vapes thing, right? So we have this massive black market now. So if you did they'll find ways around it.
I get that when it comes to a product and, vapes and cigarettes and that, and you can see what a catastrophe it is here in Victoria because of that. But I don't buy that with real estate, because if they're that powerful to get around the system to buy it, you're talking about then it's the state. Well, like, it's not, it's property. It's not like, so like, I've heard people who actually do the tobacco stuff and how they do it. They're like, you put, I think it was 20 grand investment, and you put 10 through, and one gets through every 50, but it pays out millions, so it's worth it, right? You can't, like, that's not how the property market works. Like, you just won't be able to do that. And if you get caught out, you're going to lose your property. It's not like it's something you're holding on. It's not something you're flipping in. Like, when you're talking about a product like cigarettes and vapes, you're taking the risk to bring it in to sell it on the black market. Here you're talking about you're telling me there's going to be a black market in selling property. Like, no, that's not true.
Not a black market in an illegal sense, but for instance, like the Chinese could set up shell companies in like Indonesia or Malaysia somewhere, a more friendly nation with Australia perhaps, and then
but it's about foreign investment. It's about foreign investment. I think China is the example we're using. I think the idea that we need to stop foreign interest buying foreign ownership in our major assets, but also our private housing market. I do agree with it. Like, I just think that there should be rules around that. So I'll probably sit with them too. And what was the third one? Gun ownership.
Was it gun ownership and abortion, kind of?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Not really. Not when it came to federal. It was the gun ownership, and that's the one that I'm probably way more with the libertarians. Although One Nation probably sat with me too, because I think he kind of agrees, and I think their policy is for self-defense, and he was very excited by the Castle Doctrine or whatever it's called. So having thought that through, I'm probably One Nation first, and then it's between those two. For me, just because those are the three things that they're different. I agreed with two, and then the One Nation on the third one. So I think he's actually answered my question, and so then it would be between libertarian second and think for me. That's how I worked it out. Who are you voting for? Are you happy to tell us?
Oh yeah, I mean, trumpet of patriots number one for me. There's obviously reasons for that, and then
what's those reasons?
Probably some of these guys 2, 3, and 4, something like this. But yeah, put Liberal and Labor last. Put those guys last much as possible.
Are you seeing the outrage at Trumpet's a patriot at the moment?
I've seen the outrage, but I do agree that we have to crush and destroy this whole uniparty thing. Liberal Party is not good for Australia. Labor Party is not good for Australia.
What about the part where they got hacked?
I mean, I don't have any information.
Was it
details
you that
on
hacked
that.
their system?
No.
You're the only Indian in the office. Surely it was you.
No comment. No, I'm not in their office. I'm not related to that particular organization in that way. But look, we need to crush the uni party because it's been like this for so long in Australia, right? So I think a bit of chaos. I don't mind the chaos with these minor parties, even if it's some of the minor parties that we might not like. I think having them there without Labor and Liberal having complete control, potentially, even if it slows things down and creates a bit of chaos, it might actually be a good thing. Because what do we see when Labor and Liberal are on a particular issue? They're very bipartisan on that issue. They steamroll it through, right? They have the numbers to push these kind of things through. So for them to have a bit of chaos there, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing in the current condition we are in this country. And over time, if we can have the Labor Party and the Liberal Party disintegrate a bit, and we do get more One Nation style candidates or libertarians in there, and there's a bit of more of a crossbench of these kind of conservative libertarian right-wing parties, whatever. I think that's better for the country, and it might cause a little bit of pain now, and in the future I think it's better. So that's why I like the disruptiveness of some of these approaches of that, and I know it's not popular. And I get that. I know people have all types of issues with the name and all this kind of stuff, but I'm just being completely honest and transparent with what I'm doing. And so I'm sure people will judge me on this and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you have to go out there and obviously pick yourself based on what you've seen and what you've heard on policies, and preference yourself as well, and educate people around you to preference in that manner as well. If you have a country where the majority of people are being handed out how to vote cards and they're just putting numbers based on what they're seeing, that is not a politically literate country. So you have to become more politically literate. You have to learn about the policies of all the parties who are running, and really work for the future of your country. I think that's important. So a bit of a rant there.
We have 3 more super chats, and then I reckon we're going to wrap up. We have again, Kieran is saying, thank you, Kieran, all your super chats. Is Australia a Christian country? Is Australia a Christian country?
Look, I think fundamentally it still, for now, remains a Christian country, at least sadly in spirit. I am a Catholic. I do go to church sometimes, and unfortunately I am seeing less and less people who are, who would you'd consider Australian in the traditional sense at these type of gatherings, and you're seeing people, other religious groups in this country, whether it's be Islamic religion or Hinduism, these kind of faiths, have much greater religious attendance at temples and festivals, and you see them out in public more. You can see this obviously in the UK. The presence is very much felt during some holy events. And these are the growing changes which happens to a country where you have these migrant populations who are coming in, who are more religiously dominant in many ways, who practice their faith out in the open. They tend to change the dynamics of a country. So yes, fundamentally Australia is established on, Christian, Judeo-Christian values, however you want to say it. But over time, I think we're in this kind of spiral where that's changing, and the pushback against that, I don't think really exists from our government institutions, at least. And even it doesn't exist from the church itself. The church is very quiet. The church is almost woke. So, for now, yes, is the answer. But in 5 years' time, it'll probably be like a distant memory of what we were as a Christian fundamental nation. We'll I guess not taking the knee is probably the wrong word, but we'll be accepting more of the different type of varieties of religious things which are happening in our country that might formulate our laws and potentially the way that we see social issues. So, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I probably agree with what you're saying, to be honest. Lisa, nice, generous super chat. I'm a libertarian and a lion of Zion. Well, Lisa, well done. Thank you, and thanks for your bravery. That's the group that's been countering the lunatics in the city who have taken our city hostage for a year and a half. Lisa could be anyone. She could be like, you saw that, they got a group from probably 18-year-olds, maybe even slightly younger, till how old was that lady that the Victoria Police took down? Their favourite culprits. She
was like in the late 60s or something, or 70s?
Was she just 70? Or I can't remember.
70, yeah, 70. Something like that. Yeah,
I think she might have been 75. I can't remember. But so Lisa could be anywhere in that group, but they just keep going there. So good on them. They're braver than me. Certainly you. You quit at the first sign of trouble. Libertarian Party is a broad church. We discuss these things internally a lot. There's libertarian, moderate, and more hardcore people in the party, which is very, very true. And that's what you see in the difference, for example, of Victoria to New South Wales. I think New South Wales is like a way more. They're probably more conservative libertarians, but they're super. They're much more aggressive.
Yes,
they're much more aggressive. I'm trying to think how to word it. I do love the libertarians. Most libertarians I get on well with. I don't 100% agree with all their policies for the reasons I mentioned just earlier. But it's true. It's a spectrum. But so is all of it. Like conservatives are a spectrum. The whole thing is a spectrum. Like conservative, although libertarians kind of funny because on some issues they're kind of more liberal. They're sort of more left, more right. And then it depends which libertarian and how they interpret the libertarian idea. Like, does the freedom of this person matter than this person? So I think all these ideologies, you kind of need to just approach it with a sensible and what you're comfortable, your moral compass, your values. Anyways, thank you to everyone that's tuned in tonight. Just on 3 hours we're hitting. Joe Rogan does this like every day, doesn't he? Or
that's
twice
true.
a week, 3 times. But that's all he does, and he has a whole team to help him. So whatever.
That's true.
We could easily do it. But thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this debate as much as we enjoyed hosting it. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did personally because I've walked away and I've been able to work out how I want to list my 1, 2, 3. So make sure to vote, make your vote count, and don't fall for stupid how to vote cards. Look at the candidates. Vote all the minor parties first. then the majors, and then the lunatics. The lunatic left below the majors. Any last words, Rukshan?
Well, if you wanted to get that T-shirt that Avi's wearing, where can people buy that T-shirt from, Avi? Rebelstore.com.au.
I don't have a button on this one. Do I have a button?
You're so tired. You're so tired that you forgot to shill and grift. So I'm actually doing it for you. Rebelstore.com.au.
I wasn't even wearing one of the. I wasn't wearing one of the the ones that
the ones you
the
sell.
merch. You can. I think you can get these ones, but not the merch ones.
I'm just hoping to get some free merch that I can wear.
We'll get you some
friends.
Do you want some merch?
Yeah, so I can wear it and for free, obviously, and then I'll promote it while I'm talking about
Conditions
stuff.
apply. Just send us your credit card and your address, and we will get you some merch.
Free.
God bless, guys. Thank you so much for sticking with us tonight.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thanks, guys. Good night, guys. Good night, everyone. Bye.